Okay, good morning everyone, and can I welcome everyone to Development Control Committee 8, Mid-Suffolk District Council. Just need to run through some of the domestic arrangements before we begin. Can I please ask you to ensure that you maintain social distancing from all other persons whilst in the chamber and also in the communal areas? Can you please ensure that you do wear a face covering at all times unless you're sitting down, or of course you're exempt from doing so? And can I also ask you to use the hand sanitizers and wipes provided? Please, when you're not speaking, can I ask you to make sure your microphones are turned off, and please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you're intending to speak if you're attending the meeting to speak and do persistently interrupt, we may ask you to leave the meeting. Can I also ask everyone just to double check their mobile phones are either on silent or switched off? And can I also ask you to do with your laptops just to make sure the volume's right down so that we don't get the constant pinging as emails come in. We will be using e-voting for this meeting, and we use modern.gov, the app. So could I ask members just to make sure you are logged on and ready to use the app? I'm trying to log on at the moment, but it's rebooting. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. The whole of the meeting will be recorded, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. If we hear the fire alarm ring today, it's not a rehearsal, so can we please leave the building immediately via the fire exit signs and make our way to the assembly point, which is located at Ipswich Town Football Club. Please follow the signs directing you to the fire exits at each end of the floor, and please do not enter the atrium, the ground floor area and walkways. If you are in the atrium at the time the alarm rings, please follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Please use stairs and do not use the lifts. And do not re-enter the building until we're told it is safe to do so. Okay, so welcome to today's meeting. As I said, my name is Matthew Hicks. I'm one of the councillors, along with my colleagues here on my left. We'll make a decision on the applications before us today. Mid-Suffolk District Council, the ward members get an opportunity to speak, but cannot vote on the applications before you if it is in your own ward. We have John Pateman-G down the end here, who's the area planning manager. We have Ian Duprez, who's our legal advisor. And then we have case officers who will present the applications, and Mandy and Claire, who keep everything to order and make sure the meeting runs smoothly. Okay, so we'll move straight on to the agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence and substitutions, please?
None received, Chair.
Okay. Do we need to receive any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members? Yeah, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that my brother used to work for Hopkins Homes, but he left in 2019. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other interests? No. Okay. Do we have we received any declarations of lobbying? No. I think that's maybe nearly a first. Okay. Any declarations of personal site visits? None? Okay. Thank you. So we need to confirm the minutes of the meeting that were held on the 8th of December, which are before us. In the papers. Are there any points that anyone wishes to raise? Yes, Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. Either at the bottom of page 5 or the top of page 6, when there was discussion about the quarry, it particularly referred to relation to the Suffolk County Council Waste and Minerals Plan, and I think that should be mentioned in the minutes, and I'd suggest that the wording potentially is that when it says at the top of page 6, officers to obtain further clarity regarding the expansion of the quarry, including in relation to the Suffolk County Council Waste and Minerals Plan. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we certainly did raise that point, so I think it would be good to have that minuted. Is there any other points that anyone wishes to raise? How do we want to play that? Do we want to bring that back with the additions rather than voting on that today? I think that'd be better. Okay, we'll bring that back to the next meeting. Thank you. Oh, I've just been told there will be a fire alarm practice at 10 a.m. So, so at 10 a.m. we'll just stop because there's no point trying to talk over it. We'll just stop for a full drill. What, with an evacuation? Oh. Okay, well, we'll play that as needed. Okay, it's not really a surprise, is it, as we all know about it? But anyway, okay, next item is, so we'll come back to the minutes of the next meeting. So item number 6 on the agenda is to receive a notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Have any been received?
None received, Chair.
Okay. So we will go on to the schedule of planning applications. We will go straight on to the first application, which is DC 21-01132, land off Bury Road, Woolpit. Bearing in mind what we've heard, let's have the presentation from officers and the questions and see where that gets us to. But I think we might want to be a bit more organised in our break if we can, but we'll play that by ear. So Bradley, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This application you're being asked to consider is a reserved matters proposal, and it's for the erection of 300 units on a site at Woolpit, and this follows on from a previous grant of planning permission. Thank you. Yes, this slide is the wider view aerial map which shows the application site, and to the south, immediate south of the application site, you can see the village of Woolpit, and to the top right you can see Elmswell and Tostock, and obviously the other key element within that particular slide is the A14 trunk road. This is a larger scale area map. This shows the area in relation to the site itself. I think it's worth just noting the major junction you have on the trunk road here, which feeds into the village, where access is being taken off of that that junction to serve the site. This is the red line application site. As part of the outline planning application, we granted planning permission to 300 units plus the site of a school, an early years setting. The site of the school is shown in the centre of the site there, so it's not included within this application. This is for the residential element only, and obviously if the school comes forward, or when the school comes forward, that will be the subject of a separate reserved matters proposal. This is the constraint site. You can see the site itself is unconstrained. The dark brown line, which you can see there, is the settlement boundary, and there's the historic core, which contains a lot of listed buildings in the centre of the village, and you can see flood zones which are nowhere near the site we're talking about. This is the outline permission plans. I've mentioned this in the report. Basically, as part of the outline planning application, we felt it was appropriate to have some context plans in order that when the reserved matters application came in, it was guided by those. So they acted as almost like a framework. So the first of those that were identified in the outline planning permission is the illustrative master plan, which you can see there, which shows the organisation of development and green space across the site. The second is the character area plan. They're coloured, so you can see that there's a countryside edge character area where the site abuts its surroundings. There's more formalised areas within the centre which are called village greens or open space enclosures, and there's the central spine road which runs through the site, as I mentioned, which has got full planning permission as part of the outline planning consent. And lastly, there's the open space and landscape plan, which shows how the framework of landscape across the site works in relation to the built form. You'll note that there's a buffer on the western side of the development, for example, between the development and the dwellings in White House Road. And also there's an extension of an open space area to the front here, or sorry, to the east, which is an extensive area of amenity as well. This area, which is the burial ground extension, was secured as part of the Section 106 agreement. The other thing I would point out quickly on this plan is that it shows views down to the Grade 1 village church as part of the layout overall, which was considered to be a key element as part of heritage impacts that were considered at the outline stage. This is the layout plan that you're being asked to consider, which we feel, as I've said in the report, is in accordance with those parameters that were established at the outline stage. There is a permission on the site for 300 units. This is an application for 300 units, but the organisation of the development reflects, we feel, those three previous parameter plans. This is a useful 3D view of the site, which gives an idea of approach of views, aerial views. Obviously, the usual view of the site wouldn't be like this because we don't all own helicopters, but it just gives you a useful idea of the context and how the whole thing would plug into the village itself. The story height plan, the development shows a range of story heights. There's some 3-storey elements which are located towards the centre of the site around this village green area, which I mentioned before, which also contains the leap where my red dot is at the moment. There's some single-storey development, predominantly adjacent to existing development to the south and adjacent to the burial ground. And there's some instances to 2.5-storey development as you go down the spine road, but the majority, you will note from the colouring, is 2-storey. This is the affordable housing plan. As a result of viability testing at the outline stage, it was agreed that a 20% contribution would be acceptable on the site, or is appropriate. So we've secured that, and as you'll see, the location of the affordable housing, which has been agreed with the strategic housing team, does show a distribution across the site rather than being clustered in a particular location. This is the open space plan, which reflects the open space parameters plan. You'll have noted the key, which will give you an idea of the various subtle shades of green. In terms of how this is organised across the site, as I say, it's one of the key parameters because the interaction between the built form and the open space was one of the ways that we wanted to make sure that the site was organised properly spatially, and it reflects that. I think that it does that successfully. This is a playscape design for the area of play, which, as you can see, contains various elements of play equipment. The circles you can see on there are the additional tree planting. The play area itself would be contained by bow top railings, so it will be a contained area. But importantly, in terms of the organisation of the development, it's overlooked by residential development as well. So it would be a safe space, and in terms of location, is adjacent to the proposed school site, which would make sense. This is the parking arrangement for the site, and we've blown up the allocation there so you can see clearly what is proposed. I'll just quickly point out that I know that committee are not at all keen on triple parking spaces, and that's not been, well, that's been planned out of this completely. There's no instances of that. The other thing to bear in mind is that I know there's concerns generally about parking for visitors. When the application first came in, it was generally concentrated towards the south of the development, but now it's been spread out throughout the development, and also the number 86 does exceed your adopted standard. You'll also note the public car park provision here, which contains 27 spaces. That was a requirement of the outline application in reflection of the JLP requirement, and that's been secured as part of the section 106 attached to the outline. This is the cycle path and footpath routes map or plan, which gives you an idea of the permeability of the site itself. That's been a key concern and a key driver for us, is making sure that if this land is to be built on, access across by non-car modes is easily achievable. Since the submission, discussions have taken place between us, the developer, and the parish council, and amendments have been made to the layout. For example, the path, you can see the cycle path now extends right up to the boundary at this point and would join through to an amenity area with tennis courts and a car park here. So there's a route straight through there which wasn't shown before. There's also a route for pedestrians across here that can avoid this narrow piece of path at the front of the site. And there's also a link through for pedestrians at this point onto the road to the west. So generally, it works as an organised piece of pedestrian and cyclist network in our view. The other things I would say is that clearly there's going to be school children eventually coming down this road in order to access the school site. To do that, there is a crossing here, which would be a toucan type crossing, as I understand, to enable cyclists to cross. But you'll notice there's 4 crossing points in total of the spine road, and the organisation of that is such that there'll be a toucan crossing there, a tiger crossing here, and if you don't know what a tiger crossing is, it's, I understand it's a zebra crossing with a cycle route as well. I found that out recently. So that will be, toucan, tiger, tiger, toucan. So there will be 2 additional cyclist routes across there. Materials plan, I'll quickly show you. This is a range of materials. I think bearing in mind it's a very historic location, Woolpit, we've been very aware of that. In terms of the organisation of materials and the use of use of built form, the traditional approach, which is basically recommended in your own policy, adopted policies, has been taken, and the palette of materials, which is mainly brick, with some render and some boarding, some slates and pan tiles, is really the palette that you would find within Woolpit, unashamedly so, because I think that this development's not seeking to provide a massive contrast to what's there. It's trying to be respectful of the location, and I think that that's an important point to bear in mind. There's some street elevations. In terms of what you can see, if I quickly refer to my note, because I did take you through these. The top one is the entrance to the site from Berry Road Junction, which is down here. With the junction itself, it's got planning permission, so that would be the view. I'm not sure you'd actually see that in reality, but that would be a view of the street scene. The second one down is a typical street scene along the Spine Road, which is a more dense element of the development. The third one is the view from White House Road. The fourth is a street scene along the burial ground boundary, the northern boundary of the burial ground. And lastly, the bottom one is the instances of three-storey development, which are focused around that part of the site that's got the local area of play. In terms of the design themselves, as I said, it's a traditional building built form that has been expected and encouraged. I'll just quickly mention this particular element, this building, because there are instances within the overall development where we have parking courts, and I know that one of the elements, the issues with parking courts is security, being able to park your cars in there and feel that they're fairly safe. We feel that this sort of additional element, which is a flat over a garage, does provide the opportunity for passive surveillance of those sorts of spaces. So there are use of these across the site, which I think is a good way of improving that space. Generally, you'll see that there's a number of different types and organisations of buildings, so it's terraces, semi-detached, detached, larger and smaller units. And I say the architectural approach deliberately is reflective of the older buildings that you find in the centre of Woolpit. These are some of the larger scale buildings, which again, we feel that even though they're fairly large, they are polite in terms of their architectural approach. They're well ordered, well mannered buildings, and create a variation in the street scene, which again is something that we would look to encourage, so the whole development doesn't look exactly the same across the whole piece. And largely that's an idea of the apartment building. Cycle parking, bin storage for apartments, fairly utilitarian buildings, but the cycle parking is covered, which is important, so it should be something that people would want to use rather than locate their bicycles elsewhere. And that's a typical garage detail. There'll be two substations on site. They've been located so that they are actually within frontages of dwellings, and they're contained within buildings. It's not purely a utilitarian functional element that's going to stick out like a sore thumb. So I think that the developers have given some thought to that as well. And lastly, in terms of boundary treatments, sometimes these are considered to be a bit of an add-on and not given much consideration. But again, if you look at traditional building design, built form within the village, the older walls, for example, would include things like brick on edge coping rather than tile creasing, and you'd have changes in height actually achieved by raking the wall down rather than having an abrupt stop. And it's elements like that which add to the overall value of the development rather than making it look overly utilitarian. There are of course examples elsewhere of more functional types of boundary treatment, but they're found where you'd expect in less prominent areas, hidden by buildings in back gardens, for example. And you haven't seen this drawing yet, but this is a key visual that we were provided with fairly recently, which gives you two views into the site. Hopefully you can just about make out the red arrows you can see there. One looking towards the higher buildings, and one looking into the site from White Elm Road, which will give you an idea of how it would look. I'll finish off with some views. It's an undeveloped site at the moment. This is looking down White Elm Road. It's obviously previously been used for agricultural purposes, the site. Very little in the way of features apart from natural features, the majority of which are to be retained and supplemented by new planting. That's a view across the site with the St John's Church in the distance at Elmswell, which was a consideration at the heritage stage, at the outline stage. That's another view across, and there you can see a view of St Mary's Church, Grade 1. And that's looking up towards the new road junction. That's a view looking into the site from where the new roundabout will be going in, which already has planning permission. And this is it's called the street, which is the bottom southern boundary, and access is being taken. So planning permission access has already been granted for the new junction at that point. And that's the final view across. I think I'd finish off just by drawing members' attention to the amendment sheet, the table papers, because at the time I produced my report, we didn't have the comments from the Highway Authority or the ecology, the ecology officer or landscape officer. Hope you've had a chance to look at the amendment sheet, but just to quickly summarise, ecology haven't got any objections to the proposals, noting the requirements and conditions imposed at the outline stage, which are still to be satisfied. Landscape haven't got any comments based on the revised plans, which we think, as I said in the report, address their concerns. The Highway Authority has identified a revision to the route of a shared footway near plot 21. If I quickly go back to a drawing that shows that, just so you've got a clear understanding of that. Just need a layout plan. Any layout plan will do. There. Plot 21, there's no, that's not showing it enough. I'll put it on another one. That's about. Plot 21 is this plot here. There is actually a route that continues from that point across to there. But in doing so, there's a slight dogleg in the route. So the Highway Authority ideally would want the route to be completely straight, but they're not too concerned about that. But they say that the actual final detail of that can be dealt with under the Section 38 works. So they're not actually raising an objection on those grounds. It's just a slight adjustment they might be seeking, but the route itself will be unaffected. But apart from that, they've recommended conditions which we have no issue with in terms of imposing on a grant of reserved matters. So in summary, I think that we feel fairly comfortable in recommending this as an approval of reserved matters to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I say your time is perfect, because if there is an alarm at 10 o'clock, it's 9:59. So I think what we'll do is it definitely happening at 10? Okay, so it's now 10 o'clock, so let's just give it a minute and see. I mean, I don't want to start a question and then, well, let's start with questions, because these things may run late, but if the alarm does sound, obviously we'll have to leave the building. Yeah, Councillor Passmore, thanks.
Matthew, yeah. I've got two questions, but the first one, in case we get interrupted. One of the things that's come up at previous committee meetings, which I have raised, is the permeability of driveways, looking at flooding and these sorts of things. Done.
So folks, can I just say, we'll suspend the meeting now. Can I remind you, please, not to talk about the application until we come back into the chamber. Thank you. Okay, so welcome back. Sorry about that intermission for the fire drill. So welcome back. So we just had the application presented to us by the case officer. Really, back to questions. I've got one just to keep the ball rolling. So Councillor Passmore, you go first and I'll come in after you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matthew. Yeah, the question I was asking before we were interrupted, it's about drainage, but particularly the make-up of the driveways on a large development. And we had discussed this before at committee. I don't know whether it's possible to condition it to make sure there's a degree of permeability without of the driveways rather than solid driveways, looking at runoff for water and so on, whether that would deem to be reasonable or whether that's something we could delegate to you to discuss the developer, because I think that's an important issue if you're looking at heavy rainfall and so on. That's one question I got. And then the other question I got, if I may, Chairman, at the same time, it says somewhere in the papers regarding the SIL contribution to the NHS to be determined. How does that actually work in reality? Because a big development with all those people, I would imagine there would be a request for a SIL for healthcare, and I think it says in the paper somewhere that that's to be determined. So how does that actually sort of work? If you have the answer to that. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. On the possibly the easier of the two answers, the permeability issue, we haven't agreed the materials for surfacing. I think that's eminently sensible that the type of material that's used is as permeable as possible, because we have got sustainable urban drainage on here on this particular site. So I think that as part of the recommended conditions, the final details of that could be, we could note that and add that as a condition. On the point of the SIL, as I understand, a bid is made on the basis of the planning approval, but the actual mechanics of that, I must admit, I'm not particularly up on, so I don't know if John's able to advise any further on that particular point. John, sorry to put you on the spot, but I don't know if there's anything further you can say to that.
I was just looking at the conditions while he said that, so I didn't quite hear the question, but I've... Good point, thank you. I was just looking at the conditions, and you've already got final details of external materials, boundary treatments and hard surfacing within the conditions. So the permeability of that would be a question as part of that condition. The question was about sustainable drainage, sorry.
In terms of the allocation of funding to the NHS and who determines the amount and how's that amount been determined?
So the NHS funding would have been via the outline application, and the NHS would have made a request. That normally comes under SIL now. No, this is... It is SIL. I'm not trying to be off, it's just...
It seems a bit odd we've got figures in there for, I think, education and so on, but we don't have a figure for health contribution. There's a reference to it. And I was just interested to know what sort of contribution we might be talking about.
It might be because it's not a 106 provision, it comes under the community infrastructure levy. I can check while we're talking, but...
Just as by way of further information, Councillor, the outline application and the section 106 is reflective of the basically responses we received from consultees at that time. The NHS at that particular time did not say that they needed a specific amount to be secured as a figure through section 106 agreement, and they were content that the mitigation could take place through SIL. I think your query is about how that actually works, but as I say, I don't know myself, I'm afraid, but they didn't actually say that they wanted a specific sum to be secured as part of section 106.
Can I just ask a question? So, what is the build-out like? Have we got any indication of the likely build-out time for these houses? Because I'm very aware that from 2026 you can't have gas boilers, and these, I understand, are gas boilers. So, is the plan to build it before the 2026 deadline, or how's that going to work? Or is that really something we shouldn't be discussing because it's not a planning consideration?
Well, the phasing of, there was a phasing condition imposed as part of the outline application. We haven't had details to suggest that there is being a phased approach insofar as it's going to be over a series of individual phases. We have the developer here, so he may be able to answer that particular query for you in terms of build-out rate.
And the gas boilers?
Well, as I've said in the application report, the issue of sustainable elements within the development has already been approved, because we imposed the condition that's saying that subsequent or contemporaneous with the outline planning permission that was granted, with the submission of reserved matters, they should make an application for sustainable energy elements to be approved, and they've done so. Gas boilers are going to be used, but the sustainable statement that they provided does identify that the change is required to air source heat pumps following the change in building regulations. So taking up on the Chair's point, if the build-out rate extended past that point, then clearly the subsequent dwellings, I would assume, would have to accord with the up-to-date building regs requirements.
So we have no way of having a view through the planning process of whether they should or should not have gas boilers. We've had other applications before us where the applicants have said, actually, because of the current legislation, we're now moving away from gas and all the houses will be air source or ground source. So we have no ability to influence that today.
No, it's a short answer.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just keep bringing in other members, and I'll come to the ward members at the end. Councillor Eburn, you were next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got 3 questions, if I may. Firstly, could the officer just confirm or clarify the position with regards to the sort of stalled emerging joint local plan? Because in the inspector's discussions of that, they did say that the council should be reviewing all planning applications, including those that have got outline permission. So if you could just clarify the position there with regards to this application. Secondly, what happens to the land for the school if the school isn't needed, because that, obviously there's been an extension agreed at Elmswell, so what happens to that land? And could you confirm how much of this, how much footpath to Elmswell is actually going to be delivered through this site? Because obviously it says sustainability is due to as well being able to easily reach Elmswell railway station, train station. So if you could qualify that for me, thank you very much.
Thank you. In terms of the, if I could get the plan up, please. So let's land on the right one. The actual provision of the footpath is shown on this drawing here, which comes down from the top of the junction around, and well, if you were taking the route to the new primary school, you would cross at that point, the Toucan crossing, and then follow down from that. In terms of the use of this site, it's got outline planning permission for use, or allocated almost as a school. If there was a proposal to use it for something else, it couldn't be pursued under reserved matters. It would need to be the subject of a new planning application. Whether that would be deemed appropriate or not would have to be considered at that time. But as I say, the organisation of this, the way the site works, has been predicated that that is an integral element of that particular development. So it's designed to address that space. But yeah, I mean, that would have to be the subject of consideration as a separate planning application. I can't remember, sorry, forgive me, I can't remember what the first point was.
It was to do with just clarifying the position with regards to the emerging joint local plan, where the inspector said the council should be considering all existing planning permissions, including outline ones, in the future plan. And I just wanted a clarification of how this affects this application? Thanks.
It doesn't. So there was an outline application. This is the reserved matters to that outline application. So it's not being judged in principle. We're just judging appearance, scale, and so forth. In respect to the joint local plan, yes, there's a lot going on at the moment. I have discussed whether or not we should have given you a briefing ahead of this meeting today with my manager, but ultimately there is going to be a briefing coming out in respect to that separately. But it's because both this application and the next application are both reserved matters, they are not hinged on the policy principle of the development being there in the first place. So we don't really need to go further than that today.
Thanks very much for that, but just because the inspector did say it's considering, the council need to consider all outline ones at his meeting, that's why I raised that. But just the footpath point, so there's no funding put aside for a footpath outside of the site and to get funding to get that footpath towards Elmswell.
The plan that I showed you indicates a footpath coming north of the junction. Yeah, I think the way the Section 106 is set up is if that's not secured through Section 273 works, that the developer would agree with the Highway Authority, then there's a contribution in lieu.
But only within the site, not?
Well, the actual applications of the red line application site, this extends outside the red line application site in the highway up to that point.
So, sorry, I'm not being clear. From where your light is now, is there any funding to go from there towards Elmswell, so up?
Oh, no, I think the outline secured up to that point. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, Councillor Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. The estate roads, are they to be adopted by the local authority?
They'll be constructed to adopted standards. I should imagine they would be offered for adoption.
Right, there's rather two things there, aren't they? Just constructing them to the standard is not the same as going through the adoption process.
Yeah, as I understand it, the intention was that they would build the roads and then the Highway Authority would take them on. They'd be built up to that standard, yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we'll be returning to the questions about the school and so on in debate, I think, and the gas. But the one I wanted to look at was the slide 12, which showed the village green. It seemed to me that the three-storey buildings, which were on the south and the west sides of the village green, would mean that the village green would spend much of its time in shade, which seems to be rather disappointing and not
I just
making
remind
the best
you
use
that
of the site.
we're not into debate now, so it's just
Yeah,
questions.
but I mean, is that, do we know the extent to which I'm right in being concerned as the angles and the size of the green and the height of the buildings and so on? You see where I'm trying to get to with it.
Sorry, Councillor, just to be clear, you're talking about this space here? Yes. Yeah, in terms... Yeah, the storey heights, if I get the storey height plan up as well, that's probably better. No, that's going back the other way, isn't it? Sorry. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, in terms of what you see here, the storey heights are 3 at that point along there, 3 there, 2 there. So on that side and that side, there is 3-storey development. The sun path, as is shown on the thing in the corner, the figure in the corner, is basically round like that. So at the end of the day, or past 2 o'clock, or past midday, you're going to get sun cast shadow off of these buildings. But I think in terms of a judgment, the distance away from the actual space itself is such that that wouldn't be enveloped in shade. I think there would be shading, but it wouldn't actually go right across that space. And these units, the 3-storey units at the top, obviously being north of the sun path, their shadow's going to be cast differently anyway. So I don't think that that in itself would be a concern in terms of the usability or the value of that as a space.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Field, did you want to come in?
Yes, basically just to return to Councillor Mayer's point, I think, for a minute. Wanted some assurance that the adoption of roads covers the areas identified as shared surfaces. So I believe the county is often somewhat reluctant to adopt roads that don't have pavements beside them. And the obvious consequence is that any management company may finish up with some substantial responsibilities with very high occasional costs. So I'd like to know whether that's true. The second thing is really on the, you say these sort of sustainability issues have been agreed. Am I understanding correctly that that's with 300 houses, of which only 9, that's quite a small number, have solar voltaic panels fitted? So I think I'll reserve my other questions for the developer, but those two are for you.
On the first point, as I say, my understanding is that the entire network would be offered for adoption, including the private drives that you've mentioned and the shared surfaces as an entire element. Whether I've misunderstood that, that will be clarified by the developer, no doubt. In terms of the second point, that is absolutely correct. Out of the 300, 9 would have PV. I've given you the breakdown in my report of what they're prepared to or what they've actually put in as part of the discharge of the condition. So that would include 9 PV ones, yep.
Okay, so they really do get the climate change issues. The shared drive point, I'll just make the point again that, you know, offered for adoption and the county is willing to adopt seem to be two different things. It would be nice to know what the real position is.
We actually never know. We don't know. The point here is that we can't impose the adoption of something on a different party, e.g. the county. It would be up to the county to make that final decision of whether they wish to take those roads on. I would imagine in most cases developers don't want the costs to be with them and they want to push it onto the county as quick as possible. And that's what normally happens. But we can only make sure that the design, which is what's before us in terms of the reserved matters, in terms of layout, is adoptable, which is what we've done, is suitable in all other respects, and then obviously the normal legal process between the developer and the county will take place. I am just, sometimes it might be mentioned in the 106, I'm just going to double check now, but I would imagine it probably isn't, and it would be normally just taken as that would be the normal process.
Thank you. If I may, Chair, it's just I am concerned about these issues because the management company or the people responsible for managing the open spaces, the roads and various is not defined. I think the parish council points out that they would like to do some of those things, but it's unclear. It's a nominated body, and experience from elsewhere in the county is that the costs that such nominated bodies can pass on to their residents can be quite dramatic, you know, from the very reasonable, like equal to our council, the council tax, the district council levies, to several times that sum of money. So it is something that should interest us.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Masson, you want to come back? Then I want to go to the ward members.
Going through one other, I found I wanted to ask about really was I noticed that the affordables are only 20%, and can officers tell me if that's been justified and the viability has been looked at very carefully by our officers?
With respect, members, ultimately these are issues that were dealt with the outline application. So I can't, we haven't been prepared to go back over the outline application in our presentation. We have only presented the application in terms of the reserved matters, in terms of the issues that we have to present.
So we have no say on that today? Yeah. No, okay. Yeah, but it's not relevant because we can't debate it or discuss it or change it. Councillor Mayor.
We've been told that the architecture is sympathetic to the existing village. How many three-storey houses are there in Woolpit, do we know? Do they exist?
They're not, excuse me, there are some instances of three-storey development within the village. There's not many, mainly it's two, there's some 2.5, but within the centre there's some instances of 3. In doing that, I'm not counting the church because of their completely different scale. But in the way that the site is arranged, because of the higher built form, it was felt more appropriate to have that towards the centre anyway, to create some sort of focal point in design terms, whilst accommodating the units themselves. So it's not a completely unusual element, but I accept that it's not an element you'll find all over the historic core.
Thanks.
Okay. Does anyone else on the committee want to come in? No, so we'll now go to the ward members. So I had Councillor Mansell first, then Councillor Gee. Some questions.
Thank you, Chair. All of my questions relate to the cycle route. So could we have slide 17 up, please, so that you know what I'm talking about? Firstly, can you clarify the crossings of the Spine Road? Because the crossing point just north of the school site has some road markings on that plan to make it look like a pelican crossing or toucan crossing. The other 3 points where the blue line crosses that Spine Road, there are no such markings. So can you confirm that they are to be with a tiger and toucan crossings there? That's my first question. Second question, is there any reason why the stretch of pavement from that roundabout to that first toucan crossing on the southern side of the Spine Road cannot be a cycleway, because you've got a bit of cycleway around the southern part of that roundabout, which just ends in nowhere. So there's a bit around the end there. Why is that not a cycleway? And my third point is relating to the cycle route adjacent to plot 21, which when I read that comment from Highways, I assumed it meant that they were going to use that parking court and the little footpath and make that cycle route that crosses there go sort of straight across the shared surface through that parking court and to join the road, the sort of north-south, roughly north-south cycle route path, whereas the officer seemed to think it was going to do that dogleg round the close. So can we just confirm those 3 things? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The first point was to do with crossings. I did seek clarification on this as late on as yesterday in terms of the form that the crossings would take, and spoke to, liaised with both the agent and the highway authority. Hence my advice earlier that, excuse me, that this would be the form of a toucan crossing, and you'll see some markings in the road to suggest that. These other 2, my clear understanding is that they would be tiger crossings. The 2 in the mid, sorry, the 2, let's get this absolutely right so I'm telling you the right thing. Yes, sorry, to go back to the start. That is definitely, as I understand it, a toucan crossing. The second one there would be a tiger. That would be a signalised toucan crossing, and this one would be a tiger crossing. So that's my clear understanding. I understand that the final details of that is worked out through the section 38, because I think it depends on, to an extent, on traffic flow and the amount of vehicle movements using up and down the road. And I'm not here to give you highway advice, but that is my understanding of the organisation of those. On the point of the, excuse me, on the point of why that isn't coloured in blue, I have no idea. It's my absolute honest answer. It doesn't appear in any document as to why that is only pedestrian. I can only assume that it's on the basis of some highway safety issue that's been raised, but that's something, again, that the Highway Authority would be controlling through the Section 38 works. So that's as far as I think I can comment on that particular point. If I go back to, this probably isn't the best on the other point you raised, excuse me. The situation with the plot 21, and it's not particularly clear on this drawing, I apologise because it's such small scale, but there is, under the latest scheme, a plan that shows a cycle and pedestrian route going up to this point, and then there's a table junction between these two smaller junctions here, and then there's where you'd actually have to go at an angle across the road, and then you've got a separate cycle parking route going that way. So there is you're not actually biking through a parking court. It is a separate route that's through. It's just that the route that comes up to it from the west goes over that table and then to the east. They're not actual complete alignment. There is a slight dogleg. So I think the Highway Authority was saying that they would look at that in terms of Section 38. That wouldn't mean that that element would be lost. It's just how it's organised in terms of the safe usage of it by cyclists and pedestrians.
Okay, yeah, you want to come back?
Well, I'm still a little bit confused about that cycle route because the plan just looks like it stops. So it would have been really helpful to have had a plan of what we're talking about here, because I'm not now sure if it's going on a separate path adjacent to the parking court.
Well, we've just been told it does.
Well, but it's such a small scale, I can't really see where it's going.
Well,
but,
it's for the members of the committee to decide, I think, on that. Councillor Geek.
Thank you, Chair. My questions were all around the use of fossil fuels, and so I think they've been covered by your question and Councillor Field's question.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll move. Yes, you want to come in, Trumpet Imaging.
Just a point of clarification, really. The question earlier was about adopted roads. That isn't within the 106 that we have, and I didn't expect to find it. I did find something, though, that might be more interesting, which was that there was a point made about the footpaths and cycleways improvements between Elmswell and Woolpit. Obviously, what's provided on the plan is proposed, but the contribution is not related to that. It is a set-aside contribution. So essentially there is £220,000 contribution towards that scheme that is triggered on the occupation of any of the dwellings. So that is actually in addition to the footpath provision as shown on the plans. Just to clarify that, because I think we slightly gave the impression that there might be one or the other. It appears to be both. That's my reading of the 106.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we'll now move on to public speakers. So first up is the Parish Council. Julia Evans is Chair. We ask you to keep to 3 minutes, please, and we have a timer here. So whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My surname is Ewens, not Evans, just for the record. It will be no surprise to the committee that Woolpit remains opposed to this development. It appears that present doubts thrown on the joint local plan have come too late to save Woolpit. We are victims of the national and district scramble for house building. However, we are also pragmatists. Outline planning has been granted, and we must do our best to work with the situation. We have welcomed the opportunity to talk with the developer, albeit difficult for both parties, as we had to do it over Zoom, and as the planning officer has just illustrated, plans on screens are not easy to look at. It has, however, been possible to agree some minor changes, but we do not negotiate as equals. With outline planning permission in place, the developer has all the cards. We have only public opinion. The village remains concerned about most of the topics which have been discussed today: the urbanisation of Woolpit, the scale of the development, reduced affordable housing, unnecessary public car parks, too many hard surfaces, increased traffic, speed and volume, the failure to adopt the highest standards of energy efficiency, uncertainty about the school provision and access to the railway. Recently in Woolpit, we have learned a very painful lesson. And this came at a cost to the locality, the people and the environment. A couple of years ago, I came to this committee and spoke about a development of 5 houses between Rags Lane and Drinkstone Road. We had lobbied hard for protection to be given to an ancient hedge, and the approved drawings appeared to give sufficient protection for the development to proceed. Just before Christmas, the village was horrified to see the entire hedge grubbed out because the developer was able to use the small print. The approved drawings meant nothing because the access requirements of highways took precedence, and no one in the planning department appeared to have checked that the plans met the highway requirements for vision splays. We had been reassured the hedge would be retained. However, the words, quote, "if possible," unquote, were used, and of course it was never going to be possible. So we ask the committee not to allow the use of words which give any developer wiggle room. Please eliminate words such as, quote, "if possible," unquote, or "make every effort," unquote. Please have regard to the detail and the small print. You can begin here with the Berry Road development. There is another ancient hedge which we have asked to be saved, and we trust you will make that an unavoidable condition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and apologies for getting your name wrong. Any questions at all for the Parish Council? No? Yes, Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, can you point us to some hedges where we ought to take your very sound advice about leaving no wriggle room? We've seen lots of others like that in my ward.
The main hedge that we're concerned with is the hedge which runs basically from the corner of Berry Road and White Elm and runs up towards what will be the new roundabout. It is probably the oldest piece of hedge, and this was one reason why the Parish Council asked the developer, and they've agreed to put a footpath that the public can use within the site so that the public are not walking along the very narrow footpath. But if that hedge is retained, then the footpath along Berry Road that's physically next to the road surface can't be widened. So we asked for a footpath to go inside, and they agreed to that. And so we're just hoping that that will be sufficient to keep that going.
Okay.
Thank you. Is Bradley able to show us that on the slide somewhere, so we know exactly what we're talking about?
Sorry, Councillor. I was just checking that. I think if you look at the slide 16, that may show that in the best detail on the presentation. Sorry, slide, it's changed the numbering. Slide 17.
Can I just remind everyone that's on page 145 of your papers if you want to, I think it is, or 144.
Sorry, yeah, the discussion that took place subsequent to submission has secured a footpath behind the hedge, which I think is shown in this particular point here. Obviously, some hedging will have to be removed in order to get the access in, but there will be retention of hedging past that point, which I fully agree with what's been said. It's an important amenity resource, and there are hedges within the site and trees which the majority of which have been retained as part of the the site, you will see, for example, that hedging and trees along the boundaries here are not being touched. There'll be some interruption of hedging along here in order to get the spine road in. But that's gone through consideration by the landscaping team and also ecology in terms of impacts, and was deemed the amount to be acceptable. And also, importantly, the compensatory planting that would be secured by way of replacement of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but...
No, I'm
well,
sorry, I'm sorry you don't get that opportunity to come back. You've had the 3 minutes, I'm sorry. Okay, any other questions? No? Councillor Geek.
Thank you, Chair. Would it be within order to ask Mrs. Ewens what she was about to say? That's a pity.
Well, I mean, you get 3 minutes, and we do try and keep to the 3 minutes.
Yes, I feel sure that she was trying to answer the question rather than make another comment.
Okay, we'll go with it.
Thank you.
Yes, John?
My apologies, Chairman, and I don't mean to do this, but can I possibly ask for 5 minutes with my case officer to ask him a couple of quick questions, because I need to know the answers before I make a point.
Okay.
Can I ask for 5 minutes, please?
Yeah.
Just if I can take you outside a moment, sadly.
I should point out that we do have a 3-minute rule, and actually you do not get the opportunity to come back beyond that 3 minutes under any circumstances. But we are having a 5-minute break now, and of course the ward member could ask questions. Thank you.
Can I borrow you back outside?
Okay, so we just had a quick break there, so John Pemberton could just pick up a couple of points. John, over to you.
My apologies for the dramatics. Ultimately, I just wanted to be sure of something before I said it and hopefully help the debate. The outline included a number of details, and that unfortunately included the roundabouts and the system around the roundabouts, so the cycleway path around those roundabouts. So in going to the hedge in question, the roundabout with the cycle path around it on the southern end of the development has already been approved. The layout, which you're looking at, which includes the internal footpaths, if you like, that is within your gift to look at. Now, without having a plan, unfortunately, which is closed up on that area, the footpath intersects with the cycle lane at the point of the roundabout. Now, it's not done on the highway's edge to avoid damage to the hedge, but it is done on the internal. Now, whether it's internal enough is a matter of debate, and whether we need to push it back a little bit further. But that's the bit we can control. Unfortunately, the bit around the roundabout, we can't. Now, just going back to an earlier point as well, on the top road, if you could put the layout plan back up again, maybe that'd be helpful, where you have the roundabout coming in from the A14, it was mentioned obviously there's a cycle lane on the northern side of the road, but not on the southern side of the road. I've looked at the, because I can on here, I've looked at the close-up version of this. Physically, there just isn't enough space. That's the problem. In terms of what highway verge is available, what land is in the ownership and control of the applicant, to get a cycle lane of the standard width on the north side, plus the width needed for a major carriageway to go from the roundabout through to the other side, plus then to then have enough space for another cycle lane to the southern point. The road width varies, so you wouldn't be able to have a continuous cycle lane all the way along to meet the standard required. So instead, they've adjusted that to a pedestrian, which is obviously a slightly shorter width. That seems to be the logical conclusion of looking at this, of why they've only got the cycle lane one side, not the other. It might be that the applicant might be able to talk more about that, but that seems to be clearly the case in terms of what land is actually available. However, regardless, that was also part of the outline as I understand it. So it's not actually something we can deal with today.
Councillor Mansell, it was you that actually asked the question on this. Do you want to come back?
I do, because the original outline planning permission, the red line area covered the whole space. I realise now we're talking about a red line area which has got that white blob removed for the school. So you're now telling me that land is not within the ownership or whatever of this application, and yet that white blob where the school is going to be could arbitrarily be made slightly wider to make it the same area. And actually, I've had conversations with Mr. Paper-G in the past about width of cycle lanes, and as I understand it, it's only an advisory width. And if there is a cycle path on the southern part of that roundabout, people will cycle along it anyway. So for goodness sake, just make it a bike path.
Can you just, it's just questions. So is there a question?
Yeah, about the land ownership, because the original outline was the whole site, including the white blob that's been removed for the school. So how can we now be saying there isn't enough land?
Thank you. John Petmington.
So in respect to the school land and the open space area there, yeah, you could widen those a little bit. It's not going to be continuous all the way through though. Equally, you've got a hedge line that's already in existence there as well. So you've got to balance those things together. Yes, the width of a cycle lane is a guidance from the Highways Authority, and we could have a smaller width. I'm not sure whether the county would then take that on board as a cycle lane themselves and adopt it. That's the question I would have, and I wouldn't know the answer to that.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions at all? Yes, Councillor Geek.
Thank you, Chair. The question I wanted to ask of the Chairman of the Parish Council was that in answer to Councillor Passmore's question earlier, we heard that the materials for the surfacing of driveways could be agreed to be as permeable as possible. And I wondered if that was a kind of example of the imprecise language that Mrs. Ewens felt the committee should be trying to avoid. As a good concrete example, perhaps.
Well, if the answer is just yes. Yes.
Which is nodding, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And we'll now move on to, we have both the agent and the applicant here. So we now hand over to you. And again, if you can please keep to the 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity to address the committee today. I'm James Allflap from Bidwells, who are the agents working on behalf of Hopkins Homes. I have John Lieberman, the Head of Planning from Hopkins Homes, here as well. As members may recall, the outline application for this site was approved by this committee nearly 2 years ago. Since this time, we have been working with your officers and key stakeholders, including Woolpit Parish Council, to develop the detailed design for the site based upon the land uses and the parameters approved by that outline consent. During the course of this application, in response to comments from both the Parish Council and Mid-Suffolk Disability Forum, the applicant has revisited numerous house designs to ensure that 87 properties achieve compliance with Part M42, which are optional requirements to secure accessible and adaptable dwellings, positively responding to the emerging local plan. Whilst outside the scope of this application, the design team have also been engaged with Suffolk County Council to ensure the access requirements for the school site have been incorporated into our designs. Whilst the Council has discharged Condition 16 of the Outline Planning Permission, which agrees the energy strategy for this site, Hopkins Homes have reviewed its proposals further and intends to heat all dwellings on the development via air source heat pumps. Subject to the school not requiring gas, there is the potential for this site to be free of any gas requirements. The Outline Planning Permission also includes a condition requiring the details of electric vehicle charging points to be submitted prior to the commencement of development. These details will be submitted in due course. The site, through its landscape design and habitat creation, achieves a biodiversity net gain of 16%, including new native scrub planting on boundaries, species-rich wildflower and new tree hedgerow planting, alongside the installation of bird boxes as standard across the development. There are 3 drainage basins across the site which form part of a surface water drainage strategy which has been approved by the lead local flood authority. The basins have been designed to be shallow and will be dry during the vast majority of the year. The side slopes are no steeper than 1 in 4, which meets the requirements of the lead local flood authority. The basins also include benches, which are a safety feature providing steps out of the basins. Post and rail fencing and landscaping both within and around the basins are proposed to restrict access. Subject to securing approval of this application, the intention would be to commence on site later this year, with first occupations being expected by the end of 2023 and completion by 2029. It is anticipated that the development will commence from the north of the site to bring the construction traffic via the A14 junction, avoiding construction traffic through the village. In conclusion, the scheme before you is one which we believe represents a sustainable, viable and deliverable solution to bring forward a landscape-led development which has undergone extensive consultation. I therefore urge this committee to approve this application in accordance with officers' recommendations so that Hopkins Homes may commence delivering this high quality and sustainable extension to the village of Woolpit, helping fulfil both its housing and wider infrastructure needs. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. So because you got through a lot of information very quickly there, so thank you for that. So it's air source heat pumps throughout?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Electric charging points throughout?
There will be details provided as part of the outline planning condition, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Humphreys.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Sorry about my voice, first of all. There's no possible in that, is there? We are definitely going down the air heat source pump route. There's no possible, no change of words. That's definitely what you're going to deliver.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Passmore and Councillor Matheson.
Very quickly, the issue about permeability of driveways. I know you can't be precise about that, but actually it's really, really important. That is of a concern to the committee and other people. Is everything, and I don't mean just possible, there is going to be a real commitment for that, please.
Yeah, so we've worked hard with the lead local flood authority to agree the surface water drainage strategy, so that encompasses various elements, including the basins I spoke about. So for the driveways, the private drives at this point aren't proposed to be permeable. The other shared surfaces are proposed to contain permeable material, and they form part of the wider surface water drainage strategy, which, as I say, has been signed off and agreed by the lead flood authority.
Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yeah, well, the late change of the energy strategy is very, very welcome. And what I was wondering was that if you're going over to that more electricity-based approach, have you reconsidered the very small number of PV panels that are proposed, according to Bradley at least?
So yeah, as I said, the energy strategy has effectively already been discharged, but the late change or the further change to air source heat pumps will require us to go back in and redischarge that energy strategy, and we're now working through the detail of that. So air source heat pumps will certainly be one element of that. What that means for PVs and the rest of the scheme in terms of achieving at least 10% from renewables is yet to be determined. But just to assure members that the energy strategy that will be going forward will be in excess of that 10% because of the switch to air source heat pumps for all the dwellings.
Thank you.
So, yeah, just to clarify. So what we're saying is you're now going to increase the electricity demand of the site effectively and the 10% renewables will be achieved by putting some more PV panels on in all probability then, yeah.
But the condition actually requires 10%, so air source heat pumps contribute to that 10%.
No, they use electricity. You're going to produce 10% of the electricity that's needed through renewables. I think that's what we'll finish up agreeing with, won't we?
Well, as I say, what we need to go back in and redischarge that energy strategy, including air source heat pumps. The condition says renewable or low carbon energy technologies. So we will obviously provide that detail to the authority for redischarge under that outline condition.
So so what we're basically saying is you're going to have to redischarge that. Through that will mean that they're therefore, because you're doing that, therefore you have to meet the current requirements, which is 10%. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Councillor Eburn.
So yeah, you're very much similar to the point. So presumably, officers, that means that the new energy strategy will go back past our sustainability officer again.
Exactly, and they'll meet the requirements.
Can we minute that?
We have in our they'll meet whatever our current policy is. John?
I don't want to be the doom maker, but ultimately, right now, we can only say what's actually happened to this point, which is that we are dealing with the strategy that has been discharged in its current form. Whether the applicant, and with all due respect, whether they come back and change it, will have to be something for later and has to be determined on its own merits. And I don't really. I need to be cautious.
We've got to be careful not to, because it's the point the Parish Council made. It's a commitment, but obviously that work's still underway, and that's not what's before us today.
Ultimately, and I will stress this, the heating of these houses and the connections in that respect are not before you at this moment in time. This is a reserved matters application, and I think we are going to be in dangerous territory. We start thinking that something's going to happen which makes an impact and prejudices your view on the reserved matters that are before you.
I think we can. Look, Hopkins Homes are a big company. They've said in a public meeting that the houses will all be air source heat pumps. I think it would be very difficult for them to change that view, having stated it in this meeting. So I think we just have to take that on board. Okay, Councillor Field, you were next. Well, it's more than minuted. It's been aired publicly. Councillor Field, you were next.
I think you've covered the points I was going to ask. I was going to check that despite the fact you're using gas boilers, that the heating devices, radiators or whatever they shall be, will be sourced for the low temperature feeds that you will get when occupants use the government's new subsidy scheme to throw their gas boilers away. You seem to have covered that, so I think that's okay. The other obvious one is that you will be ensuring that the electricity supply to the houses will be sufficient to support air source heat pumps plus car charging. I guess we've really covered that, so I think just that one struggles a bit why we can't put a condition on requiring the the sustainability statement to be re-examined is a bit difficult to follow, but
Okay.
you go.
Thank you. Councillor.
End of questions.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor.
Just a request, really. When you do look again at the sustainability issues, will it be possible, rather than establishing a minimum number of houses that have solar voltaic panels, perhaps, treat it as a minimum and offer that as a package to all your vendors, all the purchasers, so that it is perhaps then an option that people can take, so that we see those panels on a far greater percentage of the houses?
Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the applicants for your comments. I've got 3 questions, if I may. Firstly, the bungalows, the 16 bungalows, could you confirm what percentage of those, or how many of those, would be M43 on building regs, please? And if you haven't got any figure in mind, could we have a figure, please, for that? Secondly, the public car park, where that's situated, it's about 500 metres or so from the co-op. What was the, I presume in some way there was a need somewhere for this car park, but was there consideration made to locate it next to the tennis courts car park? Because there's a thriving tennis club and cricket club that dearly need more car parking space. So was consideration made to have the car park the other side of the site next to the tennis courts? Thank you. And thirdly, the 3-storey buildings, that's very unusual in a village setting. Yes, there are 3-storey buildings in Woolpit. One of them is the pub. A couple of them, others are public buildings and sort of key residential houses, but it's quite unusual to have 3-storey new buildings. Could you explain the rationale for that, because it does make it quite an urban setting? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to take those in turn. In terms of M43, one of the bungalows is fully compliant with M43. In terms of the village car park, that was part of the outline planning permission. In terms of with the outline planning permission was a series of parameter plans which identified the spatial distribution of land uses across the site, including the village car park, and the siting of that was part of the approval of those plans. And obviously the section 106 that was attached to that outline consent has a requirement for a specification and design for that car park to be brought forward prior to first occupation. So in terms of where it's located, in terms of the detailed design, that's been driven by the parameters that were established at the outline stage. And the final question about 3-storey, I think as your planning officer's highlighted in his presentation, the introduction of 3 stories is to bring some variance in character and bring a focal point, particularly around areas of play and open space, particularly in the area immediately opposite the proposed school. It was felt that was an entirely appropriate arrangement for 3-storey development in that location, which has been supported by the council's internal consultees as well as landscape officers.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you very much for that. If I can just come back on the car park, because the title of our reserved matters today does say appearance, landscaping, layout and scale for village car park, so it is included. So could you just respond to say whether it was considered to be near the tennis courts or that was the only site for the car park? Thanks very much.
As part of preparing the reserve matters, we haven't considered locating it towards the tennis court car park. You obviously heard from your own officers that we've been in dialogue with the parish during the course of this application and extended the footway cycleway connections from the site to the tennis court car park to provide that connectivity, but the village car park itself has always been in that location.
Okay, we have no other members of the committee, so we'll go to the ward members. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Matter and Councillor Field.
Yeah, you, as the chair said, you did go through it rather fast. I heard you mention M42, but what was it you were offering in terms of M42 compliance?
87
87.
of the properties will be M42 compliant.
And one M43. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Field?
Sorry, one element I forgot. Just the issue of management companies is clearly a statement that there will be one. I wondered what your attitude to that is, because I'm aware that the antics of such companies is controlled for leaseholders. There's considerable constraints on them, but for freeholders there is no constraint on their subsequent charges and activities. You know, how do you, as a concern, cope with that?
I think if I pick up the management company piece initially, then I'll pass over to Hopkins Homes to provide a bit more detail. Under the outline in 106, there's a cascade effectively for the transfer spaces. We've certainly had dialogue so far with the parish council, which suggests some of the spaces might be taken forward by the parish. Alternatively, there are other mechanisms, and management companies are one of those. If I pass to Jonathan, but I think it's fair to say management companies are a very common feature in modern developments, and certainly Hopkins Homes developments. But Jonathan, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, thanks, James. Happy to add. So, hi, my name's Jonathan Lieberman, Head of Planning at Hopkins. So just to add on that in respect of how that would work, effectively a limited company is set up at the point that development commences, and when a resident purchases a property, they effectively become a shareholder of the management company, and they will then enter into an obligation to make payments, annual payments, which would then maintain the open spaces and unadopted areas. But at the point of last sale, Hopkins would then effectively hand over control to the management company, so to the residents, and at that point the management company and the residents have an option either to set up a board, for example, that would then organise the management of those open spaces, or they could appoint an agent. So effectively they are shareholders of their company, which in turn they have an interest in, obviously, how the spaces are managed, but also the costs, etc.
Okay.
Thank you. So the point you're making is that the residents will maintain a strong level of control. That seems satisfactory.
That's right, yeah.
I'm now going to move on to questions from the ward members. Councillor Geek.
Thank you, Chair. This seems like a small point compared to the ones that have been raised around sustainability, renewable energy, sustainability in its true sense. But the Mid-Suffolk Disability Forum have commented on page 65 of the report that every effort should be made to ensure all footpaths are wide enough for wheelchair users, and that any dropped curbs are absolutely level with the roads. That's not in the conditions at present, and even if it was, we've got those words, every effort. That's unlikely to be enough, given what we heard today about the recent loss of that ancient hedgerow in Drinkston Road. That was going to be retained if possible. Is there a chance that that can be taken on board?
No. So, could you just tell me the page number again? I can't find it in my copy. Oh, 65. Footpaths, yeah. Well, that is the width. Well, both those requirements are now currently in the highways guidance as required. And given the fact that these are likely to be adopted, I can't see why this wouldn't be achieved. For the avoidance of doubt, I would have no problem with an additional condition to that effect. But I don't see it's necessary, but for the avoidance of doubt, it can be done. 1500 is the standard width. It's just that the drop curbs to be absolutely level. Well, there's level and there's absolutely level. You know, I don't know about you, but there's always that inch possibility. I think, are they literally looking at that smoothness of transition for a wheelchair user? We're getting to that nth degree. Consideration.
Sorry, looking at page 65, all dwellings should be visitable and meet part 4, brackets 1, and at least 50% of the dwellings should meet accessible adaptable standard part M4 part 2. So we've only got 87. Is that an issue?
It's not currently your policy to insist upon that requirement. So it might be in the future, depending on the joint local plan, but it is not your current local plan policy, and we do not have a means to insist upon it.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we now move over to the ward members to have your say on the application. Councillor Geek, you want to go first?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This development should not have been given consent in the first place, and there were many reasons not to give consent, which were all ably explained by Councillor Eburn at the meeting that originally granted the outline permission. But of course, we are where we are. And although no one can make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, perhaps it might be possible to wrestle some tiny improvements out of the situation. Let's start with car parks. Woolpit Parish Council has been able to negotiate some changes, as we've heard, with Hopkins Homes, but again, as you've heard, has been unable to remove that unwanted car park despite strenuous efforts. Surely there must be some way we could find to swap this new car park, which is in entirely the wrong place, in favour of improvements to that existing Parish Council-owned car park that's just outside the southeast corner of the development by the tennis courts in a much more practical location. But if not, if we have to have that so-called village car park, please at least let it have a usable footpath to the centre of the village. As you'll see from slide 16 in your report, page 144, there are no improvements planned to the current perilously narrow one. If Mr. Heffer could give us slide 48 from his presentation, that's got a very good photograph of the footpath in question, which is only 75 centimetres wide. Here again, by the way, an improved footpath should be put within the site, so we retain the hedge. You'll see it in a minute. It shouldn't be at the expense of the hedge that you will see. You will. In addition, the separate burial ground car park is also not wanted. Here we go. Next one. Lovely. See that tiny little footpath, 75 centimetres wide. I measured it last night. The separate burial ground car park is equally not wanted. The car park to the southeast of the estate, that tennis club car park, it's located between the churchyard and the new burial ground. It's in a far better position for serving the burial ground. If we remove the burial ground car park, that would allow greater capacity for burials in the burial ground and will minimise disruption to the residents in the quiet cul-de-sac of Haybarn Meadow, where otherwise funeral cortèges would have to go. A gate for maintenance vehicles is all that's needed there. But again, if we can't persuade you to take the burial ground car park away, please let it have a permeable surface. At present, it looks like it's down to have a hard surface. It could have reinforced grass. I mean, not just permeable, something where a plant could grow would be great. Now, the monetary cost of those two car parks that are not wanted or needed by the village and which are in the wrong place, the monetary cost, of course, will fall on the developer, but the carbon costs of constructing these things will fall upon us all, and the lack of biodiversity of a hard surface will fall upon us all. And finally, one other thing on the subject of carbon costs. It's great to hear about the air source heat pumps, but I am worried that that will provide a trade-off with the solar PV. And yet again, here we are with a problem with the orientations. Yet again, we have a development with the buildings orientated for aesthetics rather than energy efficiency. There are a lot of buildings in this development with no part of the roof facing south or even nearly south. Now, even if we have to accept, as I'm constantly being told, that solar panels can't be fitted as standard and they have to be expensively and tiresomely retrofitted, please can we at least build houses that have a roof that could theoretically accommodate them? The only thing that's more irritating than having to put solar panels on your house yourself when they could have been built by the builder 6 months ago is that you find out that your roof can't accommodate them anyway. The estate is not at all sustainable. That's in the old sense. Sustainable as it stands. It's, the fossil fuel heating I've crossed out, but a lack of footpaths, pointless car parks, and these just 9 houses equipped from the start with solar PV. Of course, we shouldn't have to reiterate this to the applicants. Mid-Suffolk District Council, all of us, have agreed that we are in the midst of a climate emergency. The applicants should routinely be taking this into account, and I'm very disappointed that they haven't.
Thank you. Councillor Mansell.
Thank you, Chair. You've now heard from both Woolpit Parish Council and Councillor Geek about their concerns over this application, and I agree with all that they have said, and I will try not to repeat anything that Councillor Geek's already mentioned. There is no doubt that some people will consider this development as a carbuncle tacked onto the picturesque and historic village of Woolpit. But as has been said before, we are where we are with the site having outline permission for up to 300 dwellings. So we now need to ensure that this development has the optimal sustainability and layout. This will in effect be the gateway into the village from the A14. It's refreshing to hear that the developer has made some effort to engage with the parish council, but we don't think that they've gone far enough. So aside from the comments that Councillor Geek's already mentioned, in terms of the layout, we have small market apartments which are clustered around the play area near the school site. Is this the best sort of layout? Surely 1- and 2-bedroom apartments are not going to be inhabited by families who will surely be the main users of both the school and the play area. We also need to note Councillor Matheson's comments regarding the shading of this open space. Again, is that an optimum layout? We've heard comments regarding the disabled access requirements for this development, and they are at the bare minimum. Again, this isn't an optimum layout or design of development. I won't go on about the car park, but I completely agree with Councillor Geek. I'm a bit against the concept of residence management companies for public open space. When at outline permission, we're told to regard that the public open spaces as some sort of mitigation for the fact that this bit of countryside is going to be developed. And surely they should be for the use of the wider community, not just residents of this development. And I would strongly urge that the developer does all that he can to make sure that the parish council is able to take these on. With regards to the school and access to the school, I understand that the school is not part of this application, but access to the school is part of this, the access points. This is one of the main concerns of Elmswell Parish Council because it is expected, or we think it's likely, that there will be a reasonable proportion of pupils at the school who come from Elmswell. And although we've got this promise of a cycle path, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail, there will be a number of people who will be being driven to that school. And you know, the fact that there are going to be these cars accessing the school going through the housing estate, again, is that a good layout? And of course, there's still some uncertainty about whether the school site will actually be needed by the county council. Right, in terms of the cycle paths, it's good that we've got cycle access through the development to get into the centre of the village via the car park by the tennis club. I'm still a bit confused about the cycle path adjacent to plot 21, and that hopefully will get itself sorted out. With regard to the cycle access from the outside of the village, in particular from Elmswell, until that new bike path that we are keep being promised over the A14, there is no safe access to the cycle routes through the site. The paths on both sides of that spine road should be cycle paths, especially in that first section closest to the new roundabout. Until that new bike path is complete, anyone cycling from Elmswell over the A14 bridge to that roundabout would be on the other side of the road. The safest way of getting onto the bike path is to go all the way round that roundabout, but effectively you're then on the wrong side of the road. So it just makes no sense to me. You'd end up having to cross it twice, and it will cause cyclists to make a dangerous manoeuvre to either rejoin the carriageway or negotiate their way onto the cycle path on the north side of that spine road. And what use is a contribution triggered by first occupation of this development for the cycle path to Elmswell? That's just the money coming in. Surely this bike path needs to be in existence before first occupation, not we'll collect the money before the first occupation. You know, it really is not, it's not a sustainable development because of the cycle access between Elmswell and Woolpit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the ward members before we go into debate? No? Okay, members, well, it's over to us now to discuss... sorry, Councillor Matson.
Yeah, for either ward member really, in terms of the existing schools in the two villages and the existing school roles, do we know if there's already a significant number of Elmswell children going to...
I'm really sorry, John, that's not relevant to the application before us. There's got to be something relevant to the application. The school is not part of the application.
In the middle,
it's not part of this application.
We're being hemmed in too much on this.
I'm sorry, it is not part of the application. I've asked Mr. Deprez and he agrees. We're here to talk about the application before us. I have no problem talking about what's before us, but not an application that isn't before us.
It's part of the outline permission that's been granted, but your reserved matters before you today does not include the school, and that it's not wrong or unlawful necessarily for reserved matters to be not a complete full set of the whole site reserved matters.
I'm happy to take anything else. No? Okay. So over to us to discuss, debate and come to a conclusion. Yes, Councillor Humphreys, you've got your hand up first.
Mr. Chair, thank you. It's only a couple of small points. I actually like this development. I like the layout of it. The three-storey housing, I don't find that to be too offensive, to be honest with you. As we've already said, in the historic part of Woolpit, there are three-storey buildings. And also the position of them, with the slope and everything else, I think it fits in quite nicely, and it does give that central point. So personally, and it is a personal thing, I guess, design, I quite like it. I've got no real issues with it. I do want to cover the solar panel issue. Everybody keeps talking about orientation. Orientation must be south. Well, if all houses face south, what a boring structure we'd have across the country of straight lines. We don't want that. But also, it's not strictly true. And I've just done a quick internet search, and I knew this anyway because I've looked at solar panels. But on eco homes, it talks about positioning. It's not just position, it's elevation. Elevation is the key, and elevation is critical as well. But if I just look at the graph in front of me, a house that's 180 degrees, 30 to 40 degrees elevation roof pitch gives 100%. Fantastic. That is the ideal, and I get your point completely. If I move to the left, to the southwest, the same elevation, it drops only to 94%, same to the east. So actually, we're talking about small margins. And I get the importance of it. If we can get absolute 100% all the time, fantastic. We're not in that world. It's boring. This is an estate that's designed in a particular way to be appealing to the people who want to buy it. And actually, they can still get the energy that they require from the sun, just not as much. So this is typical Hopkins layout, design of houses. It's nothing we're not unused to within Suffolk. And I quite like the design. I quite like the layout. And at the moment, I'm going to go for it. But I'll wait until we've heard from other members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Passmore, you were next.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Councillor Humphreys has said. I think it is important we remember we are just looking at the reserved matters and not other issues. So we know the development will go ahead. And I do think there has been quite a lot of movement from what I've heard from the questions and the replies from various people to make it much more sustainable. And I'm very pleased also to hear about the energy sources that are being used there. Hedge protection, I think, is particularly important in the way that one of the footpaths is moved to the other side. I do actually take up, I think it was Helen Geek made the point about a footpath from the car park to the centre of the village. That seems to me to be eminently sensible. I don't know if it's possible to condition that. I'm told it's not, so forget that one then. And I'm also very amused and interested to hear about tiger crossings. I've never ever come across them before. But seriously, I do think it's been laid out very, very well. We can only look at what we've got, as I say, and we can only make recommendations within the remit according to our planning officer. So I am actually going to propose that we do approve this, Chairman, formally, having listened to what Councillor Humphreys has said. And I just want to be clear about the permeability. I think, has that been covered? I think the head planning officer did actually say we could condition that to a greater extent, because I do think that's really, really important that we work together for future rainfall, heavy rainfall and drainage, but I do understand the agent applicant did cover that, so I would like to add that as a condition. So that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks so much. Councillor Eburn, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. As per my comments on the outline application, you can imagine I'm not 100% satisfied with this one before us today. I think a couple of things that I'm particularly concerned about. I'd like to see an actual time frame for this bike path to Elmswell. There is no point in putting more housing in here and expecting people to cycle to Elmswell as soon as they've moved in, when there's nothing safe for them to do so. I think, I'm not sure that we can have an informative on with regards to the open space, to ask for further discussions between the developer and the parish council for them to take on the open space while the development hasn't yet been approved. And I'd also like to see a condition that actually says protect and secure the hedge from the access point to the corner of Berry Road and White Elm Road. And I'm concerned about I appreciate that the developer has had discussions with the parish council, and that is appreciated. But things like this car park, where the parish is crying out for improved car parks for the much used and loved tennis courts and the very, very successful cricket ground, it just seems bizarre to me that those discussions have led to a car park being placed where it is that will end up being used by visitors, to people who are visiting friends, relatives on the site, and probably not by those visiting the village or wanting to have access to the church, the cricket ground, the pub in the town, I'm calling it a town because it seems like a town, in the village centre. So, it's disappointing that those discussions couldn't have actually manifested in something that the residents really need. I'm disappointed with some aspects of it. I can't see enough in it to warrant refusal, but I would really like to see those elements actually improved to go forward. And the other point really is just to have one bungalow as Part 4, Part M43 and building regs is a bit mean given there's 16, and it would be good if we could see more than one. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just pick up on a couple of points with John Pateman G around the open space and around the cycle lane to Elmswell? Could you just pick up on that? What are we able to do or not do?
So the 106 agreement, okay, there's two elements. There's the footpath that's part of the site itself. Obviously that would be built in a phase form as part of the development. There's the footpath link between Elmswell and Woolpit. That is the Suffolk County Council are essentially collecting money from various sites to kind of get a pot together. I think the pot needed is something like £700 and something thousand. I think there's a shortfall on that at the moment, and it's for them to collect that money. This would be a contribution towards that, some 200,000 odd. Collect that money, and for the timing of implementation of that link would be for them to administrate. And I can't add anything now to the 106 that's already been signed off to go into any timings for that link. That link is something else that has to be dealt with by the county in its collection of all the allocations. The ones that are, well, I say allocations in a strange way now at the moment, but while we're sorting that out, the monies from anything in Elmswell and Woolpit are going towards that, and really until they get that collective sum together, or at least majority of it together, the timing, I suspect, will be reliant on that, of when that comes forward, and I can't speak for the county in that respect.
Can I just flag up the final point that Councillor Burn made around protecting and securing access to the hedge line from the access point to, is it White Elm Road? Yeah. Is that something we can condition?
So very quickly, you can put an informative on anything you like in terms of open space, but open space ultimately is controlled by the 106 in terms of who it goes to and where. The hedge, now that can be something we look at, because ultimately that is part of the landscaping, which is part of what you're looking at. I will sort of ask Brad here, is there would be no issues that you're aware of putting a condition on that hedge to ensure that it is fenced and protected, or is that part of the landscaping that strategy that we already have?
The outline application is subject to a series of conditions, including landscaping, which we would look to secure as part of any hedge feed details we look to secure as part of that condition. Excuse me. However, I don't expect that there'll be any particular issue with a focus condition dealing with a particular element within the landscaping as part of the reserve matters.
We can add
We'll
a condition
come
to
back
protect
to
that hedge specifically.
Okay. Councillor Humphreys.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to second the proposal for approval, and I'd like to have that condition added to protect the hedgerow that we've just been speaking around, which is at White Elm Road, formerly. Thank you.
Thank you. No one else has put their hand up. Yeah, Councillor Field, then Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. We always say this is difficult. I do find the layout quite acceptable in many ways. It looks quite interesting. There are the issues of roads that may well finish up not to be adoptable, but I guess one can live with that. I find the overall issue of house orientation and the lack of the ability to put PV panels on part of sustainability an issue of quite considerable concern. We seem to be persistently putting up buildings that we can't equip with such energy sources, and yet my particular ward is faced with 3 50 megawatt solar farms gobbling up land, and provision on house roofs or building roofs is something which, if you like, is free of any additional land usage. The other issue, I guess, is the actual insulation standards of the houses we're building. We all know this has to improve quite dramatically, and we're offered 10% better than the 2013 building regs. I think 2013 is, what, 8 or so years ago. It's an outdated standard. We're not building to the future home standard, which we understand won't be around for another couple of years. And that seems a matter of, in many ways, just the will to make improvements. The current building regs require windows with a U value of 2, and you can readily buy them with a U value of 0.8. So, these are things that could be improved, and actually perhaps at an initial cost to the purchasers, but over a relatively short period at a substantial reduction of their purchase costs, as their running costs, and a reduction in the costs they're going to have to pay to retrofit these buildings with such things in a fairly short time. It's quite clear that the air source heat pumps is a welcome move. I'm pleased to see that. It's a sign of responsibility from a major builder. So, yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Eburn that there isn't sufficient reason to reject this application, but I certainly feel that we should be able to do better.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson and Councillor Mann.
Well, Councillor Field's last words are exactly to say we should be able to do better. On the detail, I must say, given a greenfield site, which this is, I'm baffled at the problems of there isn't enough land and enough width to produce a cycle path on both sides of that road. And having from time to time cycled from Elmswell Station to get to Woolpit via what's there at the moment, which is highly unsatisfactory and very dangerous. Really, I absolutely hear what Councillor Mansell's saying, that the cycle arrangements just aren't right and aren't good enough. But on the broader, bigger picture, somewhere at the beginning of the MPPF, and I'm sure Mr. Payne-Majid can find it if we're interested, you know, we have a general responsibility to deliver good planning, and I think that the situation with the two villages and the schools, with the site being offered in the wrong village, essentially, compared to where it's needed, you know, that is not good planning. The public will look at that and say, this is not good. Why aren't they putting the school where it's needed in Elmswell? And also, the other thing that worries me that we haven't really probed into, and no doubt we'll be told we can't, is whether the electricity grid setup is sufficient to deliver. And I think Councillor Field you know, hinted that with the air source heat pumps and the electric vehicles, the demand for electricity is going to go up and up. And I'm mindful that when this council was putting PV panels onto council houses, I was not able to get them put on a row of council houses for the reason that the local grid was not sufficiently strong to stand up to the electricity that might be generated. So the grid has got questions to ask as well. And I think that this, you know, as the local planning authority, we have a general responsibility to see all these other things getting sorted out outside of the reserve matters that we're looking at the moment. And I do think that we are being unduly restricted by decisions that were made 3 years ago on the outline, and if some of those really need revisiting, then I think we ought to have the courage to actually say so. So I'm not really very happy with this at the moment.
Okay, well, I mean, there's the planning process. You go through a series of hoops, and we can only discuss what's before us today. I'm sorry you're unhappy with that. Councillor Mayor, you were next.
Thanks, Chair. Generally, I like the development. Whether or not it should be there is a decision that's long gone. That boat has sailed. I applaud the parish council's willingness to take on the open spaces, and I think it's, you know, I would really encourage the developer to engage with the parish council. Setting up limited companies to manage open spaces, for my mind, is a recipe for disaster down the road. So more power to the parish council's elbow. It's also disappointing that the car park appears to be in the wrong place. We can't really talk about that. But let's not forget that this development will generate a lot of SIL money that will go to the parish council. So if they want to develop the cricket car park or the tennis car park, that is within their remit to do so. So there's still a way forward there. I do think it's very sad that from 300 houses, only 9 are going to have solar panels. I honestly believe there's a demand out there. I think people purchasing these houses will engage and will pay more for that sort of facility. So again, I'd encourage the developer to treat that as a minimum and look to be able to deploy that sort of resource on as many houses as possible. I think this is a pretty sound development, and I will support the motion. Proposal, sorry.
Okay, well, we've had everyone speak. Yes. Councillor Eber.
Thank you, Chair. If I just may come back, because I've just looked up the Section 106 agreement with regards to the open space, and it just says for the landowner to agree with the district council for nominations. It doesn't say in the Section 106 that it will be a management company. So I really would like to see something saying that the developer should discuss this further with the parish council if the parish council wishes to take that on.
I think we can only put an informative in along those lines. Is that, John, do you want to come in? Is that correct?
You can put an informative.
Anyone else wish to come in? Yeah, Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, are we on to talking about conditions with the proposer now, essentially? Right. Well, I'm reliably informed that house martins are now of species at risk alongside of swifts, and that there is a thing called a house martin cup, which can be put onto houses. So I wonder if we could just extend swift nest bricks to include house martin cups as well. And I think we need to condition the M4, 2 and 3 that we've been offered. That should be a condition as per, or not quite as much as what Disability Forum asked for on page 65. So if
I think I'll bring in John, but
with that, those two.
I think we'll bring John in because I think we were told that we can only condition to our policy, which isn't necessarily the same as that section. So John.
Okay, so what is before us in terms of reserved matters is appearance. What goes on inside the property is not. So
Design?
No, it's not design.
M4, is it M4?
Reserved matter is not design. It's only appearance, layout, scale. And unfortunately, I don't disagree with you. I do actually think the nature of reserved matters perhaps needs to be significantly expanded, but that's my personal opinion. Unfortunately, in terms of the statutory planning system for the last 20 years, we've only got those to play with. And it is a constraint on what we do here. So therefore, I can't employ that condition because it would effectively deal with the entire internal arrangement of properties. I can't employ that to put it on, in my opinion, my professional opinion. In terms of what's the other thing? The other thing was
house martins.
Now, it's not actually a reserved matter, but the good news about that is we actually have another duty under the Wildlife Act, so we pinch it and put it underneath that. So we can add that to it. That's not a problem.
Chair, we've persuaded various other developers to deliver us a few M4, 2 and 3 compliant properties. Have we not written that in anywhere into what we've
persuaded? We have no policy basis, and in this case, we have no actual basis to deal with that as an issue before us.
Sorry, John. I know your frustration, but I'm going to come back to the original point. We can only discuss what we're allowed to discuss with what's before us today, and we can't stray
into be more creative in our workings.
Well, that's for you to take up outside of this meeting, I think. Okay, so I'm now going to go to Councillor Passmore and Councillor Humphreys. Is there anything else you wish to add before we go to the vote? No. Okay. So I'll hand over to. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. Just briefly, by clarification, I earlier advised you that there was a landscaping condition imposed on the outline. There is, in fact, a landscape management plan condition, which is a different thing. We would actually agree the landscaping condition details or landscaping details as part of the reserved matters approval. So the point about the elements with the hedge that you were mentioning could be incorporated within the wording of that condition as well. Thank you.
I think what we want to, based on what we've heard from the Parish Council and their previous experience, we just want to be 100% safe that is secure and there is absolutely no wiggle room. So are you saying through that will happen?
That can be made specifically clear in the wording of the condition, Chair.
John?
I'm happy for the avoidance of doubt to actually impose that condition here anyway, so we can take that away and word it accordingly. But can I just summarise what I've got so far, if I may? So as per your papers, with the additional condition on hard standing to be permeable for private drives, unless otherwise agreed, condition on protection of the hedge near White Elm Road to be agreed, and condition on swift boxes in your papers to also include house martin nest boxes as well as appropriate. And I've got an informative note, to encourage the applicant to discuss open space adoption with the parish.
Okay, so on that basis, we'll go to a vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members, if you select the plus sign in the top right-hand corner of your app and select attendance and voting, this vote is now in progress. Yeah, if I could just take your vote verbally then, please, Councillor. Thank you. Chair, that's 6 votes for and 1 against. That's carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll just give literally 2 or 3 minutes just to allow people to move around, move seats, and members to move around as necessary. Then we'll go straight on to the next application. So we'll start again at 4 minutes past by the clock in here. Okay, so welcome back. We're now going to move on to the next application, DC 21-02927, which is the application in Needham Market. I'm going to hand over to Alex Scott, the case officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, members, this is item 7B in the papers, application reference DC/21-02927, land northwest of Hillhouse Lane in Needham Market. The application before us today is application for approval of reserved matters following the grant of outline planning permission for the erection of 64 dwellings, including 22 affordable dwellings on the site. The application seeks approval of reserved matters relating to layout, scale, appearance of buildings and landscaping of the site only. Matters regarding principal and access having previously been considered and approved under the outline planning permission. That's reference DC/17-05549. So if we move to the presentation. This is the location of Needham Market within the district for the avoidance of doubt to anybody. And this is an aerial view of the site. Now the proposal site is edged in red, and it's really divided into two areas. The most significant portion is this area here, which is a portion of an existing agricultural field, which is classed as grade 3 moderate quality agricultural land. And then there's a small portion here in between two existing dwellings fronting Hillhouse Lane, which is also proposed to be developed as part of the proposal. Now, the entire site measures 2.3 hectares in total area. And onto some constraints. The site does lie outside of the settlement boundary as designated in the existing development plan, going back to the old 1998 local plan, which is here. Apologies, my mouse work there. And Hillhouse Lane itself is a public right-of-way, even though it does double as a paved road for all of its length here from Stowmarket Road all the way back to approximately this point, where it goes into the fields beyond the town. And yes, the yellow area there indicates a special landscape area, and the majority of the site, as you can see, lies within that, apart from the small portion fronting Hillhouse Lane. Now, there are a couple of listed buildings not shown on these maps, so apologies for that, but that's over here at Hillhouse and the Granary, which is in close proximity, so another constraint to be aware of. This is the site location plan submitted with the application by the applicant. And we have the proposed layout in its entirety there for you. The proposed point of access, which was previously considered and approved at outline stage in this location here, directly onto Stowmarket Road. And we have two bungalows here, which would access onto Hillhouse Lane, and the remainder would access via that access point onto Stowmarket Road. There is also a pedestrian access to Stowmarket Road in this location. And in terms of layout, back-to-back distances are measured to be no less, it's probably more relevant, than 23 metres throughout the development. So yes, a good level of separation for amenity and density purposes, we believe. Now this is a close-up of the north section of the layout. And the top corner contains the public open space, which also has the sustainable drainage feature there, sustainable drainage basin. and that is overlooked in two directions from houses across the road in this direction and there, so good level of vigilance of that particular area. Now there are the affordable dwellings. They are all located in this area of the site and indicated by the red dots, as you can see, moving through into the southern portion. They continue across the road. And there are 119 allocated parking spaces throughout the development and 22 garage spaces. That equates to 2.2 allocated parking spaces per dwelling. And there are also 17 visitor parking spaces throughout the development as well. In terms of triple parking, which is I know will be of interest to members, there are I think 3 instances. That would be here and then 2 together in this location. I will say that these are on the shared surface areas of the development, which are not proposed to be adopted, and probably in an area of the site, I think we would advise that would not be heavily used by traffic, and that has been considered and accepted by Suffolk County Highways. Now onto some elevations. These are some of the market dwellings proposed. So in total we have 3 one-bedroom dwellings, market dwellings, 9 two-bedroom market dwellings, 13 three-bedroom market dwellings, 7 four-bedroom market dwellings. And in addition, we have 4 two-bedroom bungalows, going to be market dwellings, and 8 three-bedroom bungalows proposed as well, and those are the elevations as well. And we also have the garage front elevations on that slide for your information as well. Now these are the affordable dwellings. We have 4 one-bedroom apartment dwellings proposed, and that would be 2 of these buildings in total, with ground and first floor proposed for dwellings. In addition, there are also 2 one-bedroom dwellings, 12 two-bedroom dwellings, and 4 three-bedroom dwellings proposed in terms of the affordables. Now onto materials. The roof will be all roofs will be a mix of red clay pantiles, you can see there at the top, and grey slates. Walls would be a mix of red buff bricks and would have a white mortar, and there would be some pale render included, which will be rough cast render. In terms of ground surface materials, we have a mixture of tarmac, 2 types of block paving there, and paving slabs to private paths there as well. Now onto some street scene elevations for you. I think the most relevant would be this one, which would be the main street scene when viewed from Stowmarket Road, with this block actually set back beyond the public open space and sustainable drainage feature as you're looking at it from that vantage point. And yeah, this is the layout as proposed at outline stage, and we have that compared to what is now proposed on the right of your screen, so outline compared to what is proposed. And we have some 3D computer-generated images provided recently by the applicant. These are plots 41 to 52. They would be some of the affordable houses proposed in the northwest corner of the site. And then a sample of the proposed market dwellings proposed. These are plots 15 to 18. And onto some photographs. This is along Hill House Lane, looking north, and This is where the section of the site where the two bungalows are proposed, which would directly access this highway. And then we have the view from the opposite direction, the relevant portion of the site being here. Now this is to the rear of the existing dwellings fronting Hill House Lane, and we're looking at the main area of development here, looking towards Stone Market Road, and then just moving around, looking down towards the river valley there, and across, and back to the opposite direction. This is a photograph of Stone Market Road. This is the Hill House Lane access, and the existing dwellings on the opposite side. And from the opposite side of Stone Market Road, and the proposed development frontage would be in this location, and Hill House Lane here. And this is just another view of the frontage of the site as exists from Stone Market Road, and then some views across the field from the bottom of the site, showing the roof ridges of the dwellings. You'll notice the raise in site levels from the north of the site. This is north looking south. And then just a view across, and you might be able to make out the listed buildings here at the Granary and Hill House in the distance. So that concludes the presentation. As set out in the officer report, officer's recommendation for approval with conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Happy to take questions of the case officer. Yeah, Councillor Matheson.
Two questions. Firstly, is there a pedestrian access from the main site into Hill House Lane? And second question, what's the amount of tree loss on the Stone Market Road for visibility purposes, etc.? Only I think it's a very wide verge actually there, so it ought to be not a big problem, but I'd be interested to hear the answer.
Apologies. Right, so in answer to Councillor Matheson's questions, the pedestrian access would be in this location.
I said to Hill House Lane.
To Hill House Lane. Apologies, I thought you meant I don't believe there is a direct pedestrian access proposed to Hill House Lane, no. And in terms of the verge, that is shown to be protected in the main. Obviously, there'll need to be a reasonable amount taken out for the access and pedestrian access, but yeah, that's shown to be protected on the layout in the main, with additional planting internal to the site and to this boundary in terms of compensation. That hasn't come up in any of our discussions, not with the reserve matters, no.
Okay. Councillor Passmore.
Thanks, Matthew. I'd just like to ask Alex, you put up a picture there of paving slabs, building materials. There's the same question regarding permeability of driveways and so on. I don't know if that's been discussed, but if that does get approved, then I think there ought to be conditions so there's a reasonable level of percolation through the surface.
Yes, I'll say there's a significant surface water drainage scheme included as part of our assessment. That's been considered by Suffolk County Council, local lead flood authority. They seem generally satisfied, but yes, if it's a contention, it may be, John, it's something we could think about including.
Councillor Mansell.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've got about three questions. Looking at the comments from Suffolk County Council Highways on 168 and 169, they refer to the road adoption issues not being addressed, and also refer to standard conditions about parking, cycle storage, refuse and recycle bins, which I can't see in the list of conditions, so I'd like a comment on that.
Let's just do those.
Okay.
Yes, in terms of the road adoption, I think the majority of the site, apart from the shared surfacing, would be within adoptable standards, although it's yet to be confirmed by the applicant what the intentions are in terms of adoption. So, yeah, we don't have that specific information at the moment. In terms of refuse bins and recycling, if it's not shown on the layout at the moment, that has been or could be secured by way of condition, I would suggest. We'll have that
but it's not on the current list of suggested conditions at the end of the report. That's all I wanted to clarify. Okay. Next comment is to do with the strategic housing response, which is summarised on page 171. The strategic housing officer comments about the affordable homes all being in one cluster and the fact that they're going to be different designs to market dwellings, and yet in the bulk of the report, I think that's on page 175, it makes out that everything's hunky-dory as far as strategic housing is concerned. So have those comments from the strategic housing officer been has any adaptation, has any amendments been made, or are we taking them as current?
Well, we would, yeah, I mean, you know, certainly those have been taken on board. However, yeah, it's not considered within our current policy gift to ensure that they are more pepper potted. Would that be correct, John?
Okay, two aspects. Can I just go back to your first point, which was about the bins and so on? Can I just draw members' attention to page 320? That's the outline permission for this site, and that includes conditions on bins, collection areas, highway manoeuvring areas, and so on. So they still need to be dealt with under that. So they're covered off that way. So that's why we haven't put them in the recommendation. So apologies that didn't quite communicate across there. In terms of the pepper potting debate, it's the problem with this is that you get to the point where you've got housing associations wanting all the houses clustered together, so it's cheaper for them to maintain and manage. And on the other hand, we want to spread them out because of a potential social element that we are looking at. At the same time, what is important is to make sure they are all tenure blind in terms of their visual appearance is ultimately what is the important point, that they do not seem to be detrimentally dealt with compared to the rest of the market houses. It is a balance. There's no specific guidance or well, the guidance is that the preference would be to have them all over the place, scattered everywhere, but on the other hand, there's no policy to require that either. It is a judgment. It's a case of if you feel that they should be pepper potted more, ultimately, what is the harm in planning terms that we would defend if we had to just refuse on that basis? And I don't feel we have sufficient harm demonstrated in this case.
Thank you for that. I've got one more comment about the comments made by the Disability Forum. They're summarised on page 171. Are any of those suggestions being incorporated into this application and its conditions?
Yeah, I don't think we've gone into that much detail with it. However, that would be something that, yeah, you know, something we might consider, John.
Again, going back to the outline consent, the specifics about the construction of the paths, you know, in terms of the levelling and stuff, will be part of that, so that can get picked up with our consultation with the county. Unfortunately, though, the bits and pieces that are talking about part M4, we have not integrated into a requirement at outline stage, so we can't push it through to this reserve matters now, similar to what we spoke about in the last application.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Councillor Hunt. Sorry?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Alex, if you could just go back to the photograph of the Stowmarket Road, please, facing the, from the south side. Next one. That one. So I can see quite a lot of mature trees, and all you spoke about the maintenance of the verge. Can you confirm if any of the trees are going to be kept, and if not, why not?
Yeah, well, I believe the majority would be. Let's go back to the layout to see if. Yeah, so this bar here shows existing landscape to be retained and protected. Okay.
So it was me. I couldn't see any little tree shapes, and I thought the trees.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, that is hatched. Yeah.
Councillor Eburn, you were next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I too was going to ask why the affordables were all in one place, which is against our usual requirements, and why they can't even just be in two groups. Also, with regards to the landscaping, this is adjacent to a special landscape area, and I just wondered why there was no landscaping on the northwestern edge, as it were, adjacent to the special landscape area, and as there isn't any, whether we can ask for some to be there. Thank you.
Okay, in fact, it is within a special landscape area. Yeah, in terms of the landscaping, I mean, it's not overly structural, but it is of sufficient width with some mature trees included in that. So it's just whether that's considered to be sufficient, I suppose. I think we would advise it would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Councillor Field.
Thank you. Environmental issues again. I note that para 9.3 talks about the applicant has submitted a sustainability statement, which I think is, well, I was looking at one page of it on page 331. The sustainability officer, I think, questioned a couple of things. One, the statement about air source or ground source heat pumps not used, and he claimed well, he's right, that the statement about them not reducing carbon use is not correct, since the electricity supply has been largely decarbonised. That's the nation's electricity supply. So I wonder what the current view on that is. Real concern here is there's a sustainability statement, but I didn't see anything here that actually ensures that these things are actually delivered. And could you point out whether I'm wrong on that? And the point about the sustainability officer's issues about we're using the 2013 building regs again, why not the future home standard? And I noticed that if you compare the target U values on page 231 with the future homes, and actually some of them are certainly slightly better than the future home standard, but certainly the wall insulation values are pretty poor. So I wondered if we have a couple of comments on those points.
So in terms of ensuring these sorts of things could be delivered, I mean, it is a perhaps I'll bring John in here, and this is a point of principle against reserve matters, I suppose.
So just looking at the reserve matter, the outline application, I was just checking. I can't see, Alex, any condition on energy, and no, there wasn't. Okay, so I hate to say it, but that has gone. We can't go back. So we don't actually have anything to control that matter. There's just that element of renewable efficiency and so on. So unfortunately, we are going to be entirely reliant on building regulations. I can only give you a bit of good news about building regulations, is that, I don't know, I take it members are aware that on the 15th of December 2021, the new building regulations which come into effect on the 15th of June onwards essentially seek a 30% decrease in CO2 emissions, as well as ensuring buildings are designed to reduce overheating, making sure they're fit for future and protect most vulnerable people. And there's a whole thing about ventilation as well, not that we're thinking about ventilation in the world we're in at the moment. Ultimately, this is all the lead up to the future home standards of 2025, which is at the moment not adopted, but is something that the government is heading towards. So they are making changes to building control as we go, but of course that's building control, not planning.
Could one just ask, is that building regs that you just mentioned, would that apply to this site, or will you say this has been approved now, so it's the 2013 rules that apply?
The problem with building regulations is it's the one that you apply at the time. So if they were to apply for building regulations now, it would be of previous standard, or the current standard. If they apply for building regulations after the 15th of June, then the new standard would apply. Depends on when they make that application to building control.
Okay.
Can I just finish? Yeah. You know, we get large amounts in these papers that are purely make-believe, and I personally find that not too acceptable. You know, we have statements about sustainability that may just not be met.
Councillor Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Just exploring that sustainability issue a little bit further. I note what you said, Mr. Pateman-G, but the applicant has said that solar panels will be installed on dwellings with suitable roof orientation. Now that we have the layout, do we have a number who have suitable orientation?
You have the appearance of all the buildings, which is the reserved matters before us. I don't know if any of them show solar panels on.
No, there's none actually shown on the...
so are we saying that the layout before us today...
So we don't have solar panels shown as appearance to judge today, and therefore we don't have anything to secure them, because that was not secured at the outline application. So therefore, there's nothing we can do with that. If the applicant wishes to put solar panels on, and how many, will be entirely up to them.
Okay, so the fact that they've stated that they will install solar panels on dwellings with suitable roof orientation, and we are looking at layout, if that was 0, to my mind, then the layout of this proposal is unacceptable.
So the Act defines layout as means the way the buildings, routes, open spaces within the development are provided, situated and orientated in relation to each other and to the buildings and spaces outside the development. It does not pick up on plant, which is solar panels, in terms of their orientation and layout. And you can't judge that because it's not actually being shown. It's not provided to us to judge. So that judgment cannot take place.
So, para 9.3, we can put a line through it because it has no weight whatsoever. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we move on? Yes, Councillor Matheson, then we'll move on. Your mic.
Sorry. I expect I was loud enough for you to hear me.
Yeah, so I want to very much welcome that section. Just going backwards through the report to 8.3 on the surface water drainage. I mean, it may just be how the words have been put together, but the immediately downstream of this development, when it drains into the River Gipping, there are particular flood problems with houses being inundated from time to time. So we would really, I would think, want this development to not result in any increased flood risk elsewhere at all. No significant increase, no increase at all is really desperately needed in these sort of locations, just upstream of where the flooding occurs. So I did want to press that particular question. That is that correct, what you're saying there?
The sentence says, would not demonstrably result in significant increase. I think you're saying the same thing. But John, do you want to just comment on that?
You see what I'm saying?
I think not demonstrably is pretty much the same thing.
Alex, sorry, can you just summarise for me, I'm just catching up on what this is, can you summarise for me what the position from Flood's team was on this?
Yeah, conversations with the local lead flood authority of Suffolk County Council. It was my understanding. I'm not a technical expert, but what I gathered from the experts was this was not to be any form of discharge system. This was to be sustainably drained. On the site there would be no runoff elsewhere to the river, either controlled or otherwise.
And so the flood team have found the scheme as proposed satisfactory.
Indeed, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and in terms of their requirements, the general requirement for any scheme in SUDS these days, it has to have a 10% betterment on the capacity, so the outflow of the current site. So the field, essentially anything that you put in there has to have 10% improvement on the flow. So, say improvement on the flow, the reduction of flow. So therefore, most sustainable drainage streams are better than a field. I know that's hard to actually believe, but the absorption rate effectively has to be to the field, or it has to be at least 10% better. So that's the current standard they work to. We have had schemes, so that's a minimum. We have had schemes that are far better than that in the district. They are rare, but they do come along occasionally. But in this case, we have at least achieved the minimum of 10% improvement. So on that basis, I would say we are quite content that this would not acerbate or increase the flooding at all. In many respects, it may even improve it slightly as a consideration in that area. But it would be so, because of the whole area filters into that point, you probably wouldn't even notice that slight improvement. But for this one field, there's a 10% improvement.
And I think that's actually very helpful. So it's better than what the words say in the report, actually, which is very definitely very good. If I could, one other thing that I was rather puzzled about, whether officers can clarify. If you look at 6.3 and 6.4, 6.4 says that the proposal is also considered to provide, subject to additional details being secured by way of condition. But if you look at 6.3, it seems as if the consultants are saying that we need more than is currently put forward, but that officers consider that the outline condition is sufficient, and there seems to be an inconsistency there. Either there is more needed or there isn't more needed.
John, do you just want to comment on the two, 6.3, 6.4?
Am I looking at the same? This is open space.
6.4 is fine. 6.3 seems to be the same. It's different.
And this is in respect of the open space areas. Yeah, landscape. Ecology.
Page 176 of the paper.
Oh, 176.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay, we've got it. It's on page 176.
apologies, I was for some reason I switched over to the other report and I was looking at 6.3 of the other report. It doesn't make sense. Right, okay, so 6.3, well, yes. Yeah, okay. Essentially, we have already secured those improvements via condition 16 of the outline. And if I go to condition 16 of the outline on page 317, so essentially the outline has already secured the ecology information and tied it up to the assessment that was made at that time for the outline, and that is why that is specifically referenced in condition 16. To now go above and beyond that, we judged to be unreasonable because of the fact that we specifically secured it as a specific scheme under the outline instead. It's actually very unusual that we did that, and I'm not sure why. Because it's a personal opinion that they would like to, if you get any consultant from ecology or more biodiversity improvement, the better. And I don't disagree with them, but there is a point of how reasonable we can be in that request, especially in this I will say this is exceedingly unusual. I've not seen this before. We've actually tied this particular issue up at the outline, which I find strange because it's specific to a document rather than give us a scheme later. So. I hadn't come across this before. I do apologise, Chairman, not for realising this. But that's the way we've done it. So I think we feel as officers that if we were to ask for even more than what was approved at the outline, there would be risk of challenge from the applicant to say we were being unreasonable behaviour.
But 6.4 is okay. That we can ask for more.
You can ask for more, but I would say...
Well, you're saying we should ask for more.
No, they are the consultants that we've asked for, but we as officers are saying we've got sufficient information because of the outline application.
Okay, thank you.
You can ask for more, that might be a matter of debate, but I would say there's risks attached.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move this on now. There are no other questions. Oh, Councillor Mansell. Yeah.
Sorry to go back to section 9 of the report, and we're saying that I think it was 9.3. We can just cross a line through because it doesn't mean anything. But paragraphs 9.1 and 9.2 do refer to policies. 9.1 refers to policy CS3, and 9.2 refers to section 9 of the MPPF. Are we saying that those don't come into play because of what's already done in the outline, or can we still have those as part of our consideration of this application for reserve matters? Thank you.
Thanks. And that's on page 177 of the papers, John.
CS3 is the core strategy that refers to reduction of contributions to climate change. It has a number of issues because it refers to things that are no longer in date, not least the Code of Sustainable Homes, for example. Those elements would have had to have been captured in the outline application as all housing submitted would need to comply with. They haven't been in this case, as we've discussed earlier. So no, there is nothing in CS3 that I think is, in my opinion, applicable to those reserve matters at this stage because it's not elements that we can impose. The NPPF, section 9, would I suggest talk about the principle of the locality of the development in the first place? The principle of the locality is essentially been resolved under the outline application, and the number of houses are a set number of houses as well. It's not an up to figure. It's actually very much this will be this number of houses here. So again, resolved by the outline. Should incorporate facilities for charging units and so on. That's not been secured by a condition under the outline. So, no, unfortunately, I would say the reserve matters before you, which are appearance, scale and landscaping, are not going to be covered by those two policies.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, Councillor Ewan, I keep thinking we're moving on, and another hand keeps
Yes,
popping
I'm
up.
sorry,
Don't
Chair.
worry.
It's just that we seem to be quite some confusion about what is in the outline, and we can't, and is therefore already kind of agreed, and we can't change, and then what is in here. So, for example, landscape, which would like to see more landscape in particular areas. Can we ask for more landscaping in certain areas, or are we saying that there's a landscape plan already, and there seem to be several issues like that, of which landscape is one, that can we or can't we versus the outline? Thank you.
What I was talking about previously was ecology. In terms of the landscaping, if you feel the layout and landscaping isn't sufficient, isn't in keeping with the character of the locality, causes harm in planning terms, that is part of your debate, and you are more than welcome to look at landscaping and to consider if it's sufficient or not.
Thank you.
Before you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now going to move on. We haven't got any, on the public speaking front, we haven't got anyone from the Parish Council, we haven't got an objector, but we do have a supporter, Martin Last, and also the applicant is here to answer questions. So you have up to 3 minutes, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. I'm actually the agent for the application. With me is Mel Walton, who is the owner of the site and the applicant. This application for 66 1- and 2-storey dwellings, of which 22 are affordable, some rent and some shared ownership. The affordable provision complies with the mix and number agreed at outline stage and equates to 35%. The appearance of the affordable and materials used will be no different to the open market units. Of the 66, 9 have 1 bedroom, 25 2 bedrooms, 25 3 bedrooms, and 7 4 bedrooms. There are 12 bungalows on the site. The site has open spaces and significant landscaping. There are footpath links to Stowmarket Road. Turning now to consultee responses, the Town Council are supportive. The Highway Authority are happy, including adoption. There is in fact a later highway response than the one in the officer's report. The LLFA have accepted the Suds drainage solution. MSDC Public Realms support the approach taken to provide open space. Housing question, the affordable being in one cluster. They are in fact smaller clusters separated by roads and open space and also separated by tenure. As your officer has said, because of the small number of rented dwellings, it is easier for RPs to have them in one location for management purposes. There are other developments in Needham Market that have similar situations to our proposal. And in fact, the application that your members have just approved had 21 dwellings in one particular area. In terms of sustainability, the current building regulation situation is that an application submitted before June this year would be considered under current regulations in Part L1. However, my client is prepared to commit to constructing his development to the standard required by the interim uplift for future homes. And that's in fact what your sustainability officer has suggested. What that means is that in June, and John confirms it's the 15th, in June this year there will be an interim uplift required until the new future homes standard comes into force in 2025. We are happy to confirm that we will comply with the uplift that comes into force in June. This will involve better U values. It is likely to involve PV panels. So we're happy to get on board with that. It will also mean that we are prepared to try to make the houses as ready as possible should anybody in the future decide to convert to a heat pump, maybe with the aid of a grant that might be available. And that will, one of the things that would include is slightly bigger radiators so that the system would actually work. There are just 6 objections to the application, mostly regarding the principle which is already established. I would just say that out of respect to existing residents, most of the dwellings close to them are bungalows, as they request.
Sorry, the 3 minutes is up, so it has to be the last sentence, please.
Yeah, and where there are houses, the separation is 23 metres, as confirmed by Alex. That's all from me, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any questions for the applicant and the agent? Yeah, Councillor Mansell.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to hear that you're prepared to adhere to the interim update of the future about U values and PV panels. Is there any intention of your client putting EV charging points for all the dwellings as well?
They will all have electric charging points.
And
that's what we propose.
And that is actual charging points, not just the wiring ready for them.
No,
they will actually have
charging
Thank you.
points, as we've done on a previous development in Needham Market.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Councillor Field.
I'm not sure it's really to the applicant, but just a matter of, when I was reading these papers, I put down that it was good to see a developer who's being responsible, which is what's just been stated, but how do we make sure that that's incorporated in our paperwork so it's clear what was being offered and clear what the committee was accepting?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matheson, you had a question?
We're all familiar with the concept of desire lines, and I don't think there's much doubt that there's a desire line that says that the people living in these houses will want to go in a, what is it? Is it a southwesterly direction towards the open fields and further up Hill House Lane and so on. Very popular walking route already. I just wonder, we haven't got a blue line around this site to know what else the ownership is, but you know, have you considered either sacrificing a couple of metres of the bungalow, one of the bungalows on Hill House Lane, in order to provide a pedestrian access, or looked at the possibility of something which would actually exploit the road end that you've got, what is it? It's in that southwesterly direction. There's a potential. I think that's the shared path, the shared road, rather than the spine road, so to speak.
What you want to know
One of those two. You know, have you considered that? Because people will kick their way through the hedge anyway, and it would be better to do it nicely.
So your suggestion is that we put a footpath link to Hill House Lane?
One way or another.
We're happy with that one?
We can. We own most. We own the land all to the rear of this and to the side as well. The thing about it is it should be looked at as more of a master plan, which at the moment we're actually building here. So we could easily link it through, but that's obviously a separate issue on a planning issue, isn't it? We can't just say, well...
John, do you want to come in?
Oh, okay. What is before us is what is before us. If you're going to change the layout, which is what you're supposed to be judging right now, then I need to find a way of either doing it that can be done, or we're going to have to go away and come back another day. It's intriguing as well, because access isn't part of this. So, but I've just looked at the outline application, and access was agreed in three areas: the main road access to the main road, the corner pedestrian link, but also a cycle and emergency access come footpath link next to those two bungalows to Hill Lane. So there was access agreed just because it was agreed there doesn't mean when they come in reserve matters they wish to implement all three. They've only gone for the two, which is the two on the main road. What you're asking for is that one essentially that was agreed at outline to be put back. So access is okay because we've already effectively agreed that.
John, if the applicant here today says they're happy to put a link in there, is that good enough?
So what I would have to say is the best way to do it from our point of view, without having to go away and come back again, would be to add a condition that says, notwithstanding the layout of the two bungalows, whatever plot numbers they're called, a revised layout shall be submitted to us for agreement that would incorporate a link to Hill House Lane. That would be the best way forward.
Page 350 of our pack shows a site layout that has an emergency and pedestrian access to her.
That was the outline.
That's outline.
That was the outline. So that's the indicative outline plan. But on the indicative plan, access was part. So if you ignore all the houses and just pretend that's a red line, the free access points were the ones that were agreed at outline. And you can see on that plan, you've got two at the road, the pedestrian link and the road link. And you would have had one potential, it says in a little, you can't see it on your, but it says there emergency access, cycle and footpath. So essentially the access has been agreed that could be taken forward. What we're trying to get to is a layout that allows you to get from the road to the lane.
Just bring in the applicant to ask
But you're
the question,
designing it.
because, could the applicant just come in on this point?
I think historically, when the outline consent was granted, highways didn't particularly want that access. We are perfectly happy to tell you here and now that that we'll reinstate that access if that is what members would want.
Okay, well, we'll come to that in the debate, but thank you for making that clear. Any other questions for the applicant? No, I'm going to move on to the ward member, and I'll take this off. I will read, it's quite long, so please, this is from Mike Norris. Please accept my apologies in respect to this application as I'm currently unwell, having been diagnosed today with contact dermatitis, and I think it's best I do not attend the committee meeting as a ward member. This application is a resubmission of that which was scheduled to be determined at DC Committee A meeting on the 8th of December 21, but was subsequently withdrawn by officers. I've carefully reviewed the latest submitted papers and can see no significant difference to the original submitted for the December meeting, including the apparent difference in the number of dwellings proposed. Therefore, I see no reason to revise my original comments circulated on the 6th of December 21 in respect to this application, which are as follows. I note that there are objections on file from residents of the adjoining properties on Hill House Lane, Chesford, Dodds, Mead and Four Winds concerning overlooking. The proposed site layout shown on page 341 in the resubmitted papers is different to that shown in the indicative site layout included in the original outline planning permission DC 17-05549. There are now 3 two-storey, 4-bedroom proposed adjacent to the above properties. I suggest that to comply with policies H15, development, to reflect local characteristics, and H16, protecting existing residential amenity, the proposed two-storey dwellings adjacent to the existing single-storey properties in Hill House Lane should be bungalows, which will give more gradual edge to the development. If this is not possible, then at least southeast-facing windows of the proposed two-storey dwellings should be fitted with obscure glass to avoid overlooking. Also, the boundary treatment adjacent to the proposed footpath linked to Stowmarket Road in this area should be supplemented with 1.8 metre high close boarded fence to give privacy for existing residents. The proposed main entrance to the development from Stowmarket Road, shown on the revised site layout, is almost opposite that to the site for 9 dwellings with garages approved under planning application DC 18-03965, which is currently under construction. Although SCC Highways have not expressed any comments in this respect, it is already a matter of some concern locally that speeding is regularly an issue along this stretch of the B1113. This is evidenced by the fact that Needham Market Neighbourhood Watch have authority to carry out speed checks on this road, and also that a police camera van can be stationed in this area occasionally. To have around possible 150 plus vehicle movements a day entering and exiting two sites on opposite sides of this stretch of road cannot be conducive to highway safety, and I would suggest that an alternative position for the site entrance should be considered. I have a few other comments. On the recommendations on page 178 under the fourth bullet point, those already imposed by way of outline planning permission reference DC 17-05549. However, SCC Highways recommendation at the foot of page 200 reads, due to the size of the proposed garages, dwellings that require a garage to provide parking in accordance with Suffolk's guidance for parking 2019 will require additional secure covered cycle storage along with dwellings that do not benefit from a garage. This does not appear to be reflected in either the conditions listed on page 311 or 312 of the papers, nor page 178. The recommendation on page 292, paragraph 3 from SCC Development Contributions Manager reads, play space provision. Consideration will need to be given to adequate play space provision. A key document is Quality in Play document, 5th edition, published 2016 by Play England. Again, this does not appear to be reflected in either set of the conditions. There appears to be some confusion as to the total number of dwellings. The description of development on page 165 mentions 64 dwellings accessed from Stowmarket Road with an additional 2 dwellings accessed from Hill House Lane, i.e. a total of 66 dwellings. Whereas page 173, para 21 and para 22 mentions 64 dwellings, 62 accessed from B1113, Stowmarket Road, and 2 accessed from Hill House Lane. For the above reasons, I continue to be unable to support this application in its present form. And that's from Mike Norris from Needham Market Ward. I haven't had anything from the other ward member. So, yes, questions on the back of that, probably to the case officer. Councillor Mansell.
Councillor Norris referred to another planning application that's already got permission in this area. Could somebody just point out where that is, how many houses it is, and where the access point is? Thank you.
I don't deal, unfortunately, Needham Market is blue team. I don't deal with blue team. In terms of, I know there's the development that was allowed at appeal at the very top of Hill House Lane.
Side, there are 9 dwellings approved under DC 18-03965, which is currently being built out.
Can I just give you the reference number again? Sorry.
DC 18-03965.
03965. Oh, right, okay. Reserve matters. Bear with me. Oh, right. Yes, there is a development on the opposite side of the road for 9 houses. Approved and reserved matters given.
Can we see where that is on the map?
We can try.
Put up the slide 6, please. Thank you. And so whereabouts is it located, John? The mouse is here.
Go left, up, down a bit. Yeah, just there.
That's just there.
That's
so there's 9 houses in there.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
On
Can
that
you take
point,
your mask off, just
I think the I think the applicant has mentioned, and in fact I'd also identified with the officer just before the meeting started that he also owns another development. That's right, Alex is on it now. That's under development or about to be also, and it's adjacent to this site. I think we see that a blue line is quite useful sometimes on these things.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Yes, Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just clarification, excuse my voice again, clarification on numbers of houses. I believed it was 62, 22 affordable, or have I got that wrong? I've heard three figures now.
Okay, description of development, erection of 64 dwellings. Apologies, Jim. I'm going back to the description of development. So it's reserve matters for erection of 64 dwellings, including 22 affordable homes. So 64 in total.
Thank you.
And the 2 access from Hill House Lane?
Yeah.
So to my mind, that makes it 66 in total.
Yeah.
It's the 64 on one access and 2 on another access.
If you read the entire description, I agree, Councillor Mann, so that's what it says.
Okay, yes, including that. Yes,
64
sorry.
of which 22 are affordable, plus another 2.
And of course, the outline was for 66, yes.
Just to help as well, on page 174, the breakdown of those properties, and it adds up to 66, is on there as well. That's the breakdown of the properties.
Okay, I'm going to move us on to debate now. It's up for us to this, unless you have any other. No, sorry, we've just had the ward members, so there are no more questions. We're on to debate. So really up to us to discuss, debate, and come to a conclusion. Councillor Field.
Before we move to debate, could you just make it clear, the ward member did ask for some houses be single storey, and I wasn't quite clear which ones that was, because certainly a certain number of the houses in this development back onto the 2 that are being provided in Hill House Lane, and I don't see a great deal of other houses which would have a problem. Could someone make it clear which we're talking about?
Sorry, could we? Thank you very much. Okay, now I believe the properties Councillor Norris is referring to would be these 2 existing properties. Certainly we've had some significant objections from these 2 occupants. Now, what faces them is the frontage of 3 dwellings, and first floor windows, from my measurements, would be no less than 20 metres from the boundary. So we're looking at sort of there to there being the smallest measurement. And if I can just get so that is plot 1. So if I can go to the elevation of plot 1, and this will give you an idea of what would be facing that particular neighbour. So here. So the closest element would actually be the garage at single-storey level. You then go on to this blank gable here, set further back, and the actual windows would be a lot further back. They would be 20 metres from the boundary, from my measurement. So
Okay.
that's what would be.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Councillor Mansell, you've got a question or into debate? It's up to you.
Well, I'm not quite sure. Again, it was something that Councillor Norris mentioned about the highways condition, which I think might have been what I was asking about before, about the cycle storage, because the garages weren't going to be big enough for putting cars and bikes in, I presume, and also because if we are going to start debate, what is the can we put a condition on about that, about the comments that Highways made about cycle storage and parking provision?
Well, it'll be a question of whether it's already covered by the outline, I suppose. Would we have the ability to impose that, John? Reserve matters?
Sorry, I was just looking again at the outline. Prior to the commencement of development, details of the areas provided for loading, unloading, manoeuvring and parking of vehicles, including secure cycle storage, shall be submitted to and approved in writing to us. So that sits as a separate condition on the outline. What details have we got here? If we're saying, if I just go back to the layout, bear with me, sorry. close this down. Can you give me a moment to come back to you? Just check where the condition comes in.
If we are into debate, can I start forming my opinions? I think it's good that we hear from a developer who is willing to make some concessions to make homes more future-proof. And it appears to me that we are such hostages to fortune about what is put in the outline. I really think we need, I know this isn't a thing for today, but in future, perhaps we need to be made more aware of it at the outline stage of whatever goes on as conditions in outline. In a way, has to be future-proof because this outline was given in 2018, and that's getting on for 4 years ago, and things move at a pretty quick pace. And I just think this is we need to think about this and remember it next time we're looking at an outline permission. I know that's not for today. And I think it was lovely and refreshing to hear the agent say that they were prepared to move to the interim update that isn't even going to come into force until June. They are prepared to put EV charging points for all the dwellings. And yet we had that comment from Councillor Field about it's lovely hearing that, but can we guarantee it? And I'm guessing that Mr. Pateman-G is going to say no, we can't guarantee it. We're just on the promise of the landowner and the agent, and it just seems so wrong to me because I think that they have thought about things here, and you know, maybe this is a well-designed development. I'm not familiar with the area, and I just really like it that we could hold the promises that we've heard today.
I think on every point I agree with you. I think it's a lesson to us all on outlines that it can take so long, and I think you're right. But you know, this is a public meeting, aired online. People are watching, and the developer has made a commitment. I don't know how we can go beyond that.
If I carry on, if we can put a condition in to cover those issues that Suffolk County Council Highways highlighted about I think it was the shared roadways and the cycle parking and bin provision areas or whatever, which does seem to be a bit of a grey area at the moment, and I'll wait to hear what Mr. Pateman-G says.
So as far as the bins are concerned, I think that's already covered by the outline, and that still needs to be discharged. So I'm happy that that is self-contained and deals with that issue. Secure cycle storage is not as straightforward because it's tied up in the manoeuvring and turning areas. We already know what the manoeuvring and turning areas are because we now have the layout that shows us that. And so the risk of not now dealing with the cycle storage means that there is an argument, if we don't deal with that right now, it won't come back to us because they don't have to come back to us. So I'm actually going to say that we do need to put a further condition because in terms of the layout, I don't have complete oversight, unless my colleague is going to correct me, on the secure cycle storage for this scheme. So I would say, for the avoidance of doubt, and I think because the outline doesn't completely tie up to this, I would say that we should condition cycle storage to be agreed for the scheme. I accept that the point Councillor Norris was making was with regard to non-garages. I think for the sake of covering it all off, I'll just take the whole lot and just say we need to see further details on cycle storage for the whole scheme. I'd be happy to add that condition in, or whoever talks about that later. The point around, I will just say one other thing you said there. It's interesting because we have done actually quite a lot in the last couple of years from outlines that we were approving to outlines we now approve. For example, you know, we talked about levels a lot today. Ironically, one of the conditions is now default on outline is a levels condition, that all dwellings have to be level with at least one access. It's a slight improvement on what we did 3 years ago, but it does show that there is evolution. And I think what we're trying to take away from today is there's more that we can be doing. And one key point is perhaps around that disabled element that needs to be pulled into the outline in future.
Thank you. I'm going to move us on. So Councillor Passmore is next.
Thank you, Matthew, very much. Yeah, I actually like this development, and I think, without repeating everything, I think it's very, very encouraging and heartwarming that developers and applicants are prepared to move and work with us as opposed to try and resist things. So I think that's very, very commendable. And I think we've mentioned one or two conditions there about drainage, permeability. So I actually am going to propose that we do approve this application with the other conditions that we've already discussed. I think there was one there that didn't perhaps get discussed with Councillor Norris about a 1.8 metre high fencing for privacy, which I do think is perfectly reasonable. It's not a great cost, and I imagine that was for the 3 houses that we talked about earlier, but I'm not quite sure, so we need to clarify that, but no doubt that can be conditioned. So you put all the other sustainability measures in there as well, which I think is very commendable. You didn't have to do that, but you have done it. So therefore, I'm going to propose formally, Chairman, that we grant permission.
Thank you very much. Councillor Field, you were next.
Thank you. Well, I find it significant that Needham Market Town Council support the application. And certainly I don't want to repeat everything that's been said, but it's certainly pleasing to see a developer who is prepared to move to the forthcoming issue of the building regulations. We do desperately want to see the insulation and sustainability standards housing improved, and there does seem to be an offer here. I was very concerned that offer appeared to be in our documents, and then we were essentially told it was all make-believe. Well, the developer's made it clear that he will go with those statements. I'm prepared to take that on trust. So I think on that basis, and the actual physical layout looks quite acceptable. So on that basis, I'm quite happy to second the
Proposer and a second. I've got a couple of people that want to speak before we go to the vote. Councillor Humphreys, did you want to add?
Mr Chair, yeah, please, thank you. And I welcome the 34.37% affordable housing in the right place. So well done on that. But conditions-wise, I agree with everything that's been said, by the way. Have we missed off the footpath? Is that going to be a condition?
Would a summary help at the moment, what I've got?
We'll do a summary when everyone else has spoken.
Okay. Well, at the moment, I've got it down as the footpath, cycle storage, and a 1.8 metre fence.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. One of the points that I made and asked in questions was about the landscaping, and I'm still concerned that this is in a special landscape area, and the edge of this development is going to be a very hard edge, and I wonder if we can improve the landscaping somehow down that northwestern edge of the development, where it's actually, it's in a special landscape area, but it's actually now going to be the edge of it, and whether that can be improved in some way with this development. Thank you, Chair.
How can we do that, John, if Councillor Passmore and Councillor Field are happy?
I'd question whether there's enough room within the red line, personally, to get this kind of structural landscaping. I can see the merits and the benefits, but yeah,
I think we may be getting into redesign. To what extent we go into that, I don't know. But what we're talking about here, I don't know if you've got the layout plan, is essentially the main area is the rear of plots 34 to 40, and it's their rear gardens that buffer up to that northern edge. There's essentially is that about a metre wide hedge? Is that the landscaping detail?
It would be double staggered rows.
Right.
Yeah.
With a few trees as well. Is that established? Is that there at the moment?
What to the north? No, it's completely untreated.
Yeah. How much wider do you want it to be?
Can I suggest, I think if we're not careful, because we could say 3 rows, 4 rows, can I just suggest that we have an informative, that it would be a wish to see that bulked up, and we would, of course we can't impose it, but we'd ask that it's bulked up and looked at by the agent. I mean, the applicant seems to be very reasonable in negotiating most things, so I think if you're happy.
Ultimately, the point of debate here is whether you feel that that is satisfactory, and if it's not landscaped sufficiently, that obviously is a matter for your debate and consideration. There is a degree of possibly widening it very slightly, but you're not going to get much more than that much more because of how much more imposing of landscaping onto the practical gardens that are being proposed here. And of course, if you then feel the gardens are going to get too small, is that a complete redesign, and therefore is this design actually refusable?
So I think let's go down the route if you're happy.
Can I just come back?
Yeah.
Is that the edge, you know, I'm referring to the kind of the southwest edge, as it were, so the long edge. And, you know, I understand that land is all in the ownership of the applicant. So if it wasn't informative, then I kind of think, you know, if they can do something better on that edge, that would be great, especially given it is a special landscape area. But thank you, Chair, for that.
I mean, I see the agent nodding, so I think that's been picked up. Okay, I think we're about there. Councillor Matheson, sorry.
I think that this application is generally fairly satisfactory, better than some we see, which is good, and especially the fact that the fabric of the building is going to actually go ahead of the minimum requirements, which is very good. But obviously it's still connecting to the gas grid, which is disappointing, and we've just the applicant, of course, has been here to hear that one of the major developers has now moved away from the gas. Presumably there's gas in Woolpit that they've not connected to this morning. So generally I think this is good, and we're getting the connection into Hill House Lane for pedestrians.
It's been added as a condition.
We think.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think on that basis, we've had it proposed by Councillor Passmore, seconded by Councillor Field. John, can you just remind us of all those conditions just as we go to the vote?
Thank you. So I've got approved as papers with the additional conditions of, the first condition would say, notwithstanding plans submitted, details of a footpath link between Hill House Lane and the development that may require revision to the layout of plots 65 and 66 shall be submitted to the local planning authority for approval and implemented as may be approved. Second condition is details of cycle storage to be agreed for all plots. Third condition is 1.8 metre high fence along the boundary, and I've named the three first properties as you're going up Hill Lane, so it shall be erected and secured, and an informative note to encourage improved landscaping along all boundaries.
And the permeable driveways?
Oh. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, on that basis, we will go to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress in your app. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 8 votes for, that's carried.
Good. Well, thank you. Are there any site visits planned?
No, Chair.
None planned. Okay, so we close the meeting at about somewhere between 1:20 and 1:23, depending on which clock you look at. Thanks, everyone.